Chapter 899. Samsara of Ichizo is on leave. There will be no updates today. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 900. Cruising ships were common in the ancient Lotus Star region. Usually, they wandered among the stars and flew to investigate. They were like sentries patrolling the mortal world. Now, the ancient Lotus Star region had changed, and the Dali dynasty was in chaos. Therefore, these cruising ships came and went more frequently than before. They flew back and forth, and if there was a suspicious person, they would be interrogated. In fact, Sumo could completely hide the demonic ship's aura and even its form. That way, they would be able to hide from all the sentry ships without anyone noticing. Shun Lang and the others had infiltrated the Dali realm that way. After all, reincarnation realm cultivators were the top cultivators in the dust realm. Unless a venerable deliberately searched, it would be difficult to find them. But Sumo didn't do that. He wanted to go to the Dali realm and see what the situation was like. The cultivators on the cruising ships were usually world destroyer or sea destroyer cultivators. Therefore, it was difficult for them to find reincarnation realm almighties and above. Usually, those they discovered were not peerless almighties. However, this time, the cruising flying ship had actually encountered Sumo. There were only 3 cultivators on the cruising ship. They were all dressed in black robes with soft armor on the outside and special masks on their heads. One of them was in the early stage of Sea Destroyer, and the other 2 were in the late stage of World Destroyer. This kind of cultivation would be considered almighties on an ordinary star, but in the universe, it was only ordinary. They were a combat team in charge of patrolling a radius of 300,000 miles. In the distance, they saw Sumo's demonic ship. At this time, the demonic ship was only 10 feet long. It looked black, but it wasn't very eye-catching. However, Sumo was in white, and she was very handsome. Ur was in green, and she was cold and beautiful. They didn't look like ordinary cultivators. Therefore, the cruising ship blocked their way. "Who are you?" asked the Sea Destroyer cultivator on the cruising ship. "Oh." Sumo looked at the 3 cultivators and couldn't help but smile. "We are going to the Dali realm." "Nonsense," the Sea Destroyer cultivator scolded. Actually, he didn't see through Sumo's and Wu-Er's cultivation, but he subconsciously treated Sumo and Wu-Er as low-level cultivators. After all, they had stopped Sumo's boat. This direction naturally leads to the Dali realm. Furthermore, you have already entered the Dali astral. Specifically, what are you doing? Where are you going? The Sea of Annihilation cultivator said coldly. Hee. Sumo was not angry at all. "We are merchants from the astral world, and we want to go to the Saint Emperor planet." "Astral merchants? Sacred Emperor planet?" The Sea Extermination cultivator was taken aback. The 2 late-stage break world people behind him looked at each other. Their faces froze. Now that the Dali realm was in a state of war, interstellar merchants appearing here at this time naturally could not be allowed to pass. That was because a true astral world merchant did not care about what he carried on his body. Perhaps they were selling resources for the immortal war. Martial law has been imposed on the Saint Emperor planet, the cultivator of the Sea of Annihilation said. Now, the entire Dali realm cannot be entered or exited at will. Do you have the warrant of the second prince? If not, you must hand over your storage treasures and let us have a closer look. The warrant of the second prince? Sumo smiled and said, "We do not have the warrant of the second prince. But can we have the warrant of the 4th prince?" The warrant of the 4th prince? The Sea of Annihilation cultivator's face changed. At this time, his aura had increased. He was in a state of full alert. "Are you with the 4th prince?" "No." Sumo smiled and shook her head. "I am with the eldest princess." "With the eldest princess?" The fire-extinguishing cultivator's face changed again. At the same time, he waved his hand. Whoosh! The 2 break world cultivators waved their hands and produced 2 big golden nets. They covered Sumo and Wu-Er. The eldest princess's people seemed to be scarier than the 4th prince's people. Without the eldest princess's support, the 4th prince would not have been able to fight against the 2nd prince. The flying ship team in front of them belonged to the second prince. The second prince had ordered that the people of the fourth prince and the eldest princess should be captured. If not, they should be killed. But the two cultivators in front of them had announced their names. This in itself was a provocation. So, how could they not capture Sumo and Wu-Er? No matter what, they had to capture them first. At this moment, they did not think too much about it. Usually, they had encountered spies and assassins. So, they were very familiar with this. But this time, they had kicked an iron plate. The two golden nets were both immortal-level treasures. Such a configuration was considered top-notch among the cruising flying ship teams, because they could even fight against a one-lifetime immortal realm cultivator. That was why they dared to attack. However, after the two treasures flew out, they stopped 3 zhang above Sumo and Wu-Er's heads. The two golden nets were like 2 canopies hanging above their heads. They could not fall at all. Sumo and Wu-Er looked at them calmly with smiles. They did not move at all. The 3 cultivators' faces changed suddenly. They were not stupid people. This scene made them realize that the 2 cultivators in front of them were absolute almighties. They were not existences they could defeat. So, as soon as the flying ship moved, they tried to escape. However, they suddenly found that their flying ship had been imprisoned. The power formation on the flying ship was still there, but it could no longer provide any power for the flying ship. The flying ship was fixed in the void by an extremely powerful force. The cultivator of the extermination sea realm wore a mask, but a cold light flashed in his eyes. Every single one of these patrolling cultivators was loyal and devoted. They knew that they could not escape today. The cultivator of the extermination sea realm shook his hand, and a messenger talisman soared into the sky. Sumo looked at the talisman and could not help but smile. In fact, he was completely capable of stopping it from exploding. But he did not do anything. He really wanted to see what kind of power the second prince had. Boom! Crack! The messenger talisman instantly exploded. A 5-colored light appeared in space, spreading for hundreds of thousands of miles. That was the unique messenger talisman of the Li dynasty. Sumo and Wu-Er, it did not move. The cruising flying ship could not move even if it wanted to. 300 feet away from the demonic boat was the flying ship. They stopped together in the void. The eyes of the 3 Li dynasty cultivators flickered, as if they were thinking about how Sumo would treat them and how to escape. However, Sumo did not move. After a while, when will they arrive? Sumo asked with a smile, because in his opinion, they had waited for a long time. If you know what's good for you, you'd better not wait for them. The cultivator of the extermination sea realm said, there are some Samsara generals under the second prince 200,000 miles away. Once they arrive, you will not be able to escape. Samsara generals? Sumo asked with a frown. Of course. The cultivator of the extermination sea realm sneered. So, you won't be able to escape in less than half an hour. They will be here soon. Oh. Sumo pretended to be surprised, then looked at the cultivator of the extermination sea realm and said with a faint smile, then we will wait for them. The cultivator of the extermination sea realm was speechless. Chapter 901. Where did this cultivator come from? The 3 cultivators on the flying ship felt nervous, because that cultivator from the Sea of Destruction realm had been exaggerating. The second prince did have some Samsara-level warriors under him. However, the message talisman they used just now could not summon a rebirth realm warrior. After all, they were just a small patrol team. How could a Samsara-level warrior have the time to care about them? Just now, the Sea Extermination Cultivator had said there were Samsara-level warriors to scare Sumo and Wu-Er away. However, no matter what, they never expected that the pair of cultivators would remain unmoved. They stood calmly on the black boat, as if they were waiting for old friends that they had not seen for many years. Could they be above Samsara? The Sea Extermination Cultivator thought. But if they were above Samsara, why would they pass through the defense line? In short, the 3 cultivators on the flying ship couldn't understand. Of course, Sumo wouldn't explain. A moment later, he saw 3 flying ships flying over from afar. They were similar in style to the flying ship, but there were 5 cultivators on each ship. 3 of them were dressed the same as those on the cruising airship, while the other two were wearing dark brown armor without masks. They were two One-Life Immortal Realm cultivators. There were 6 Immortal Realm cultivators on the 3 flying ships, and one of them was a One-Life Immortal Realm cultivator. They were reinforcements, but there were no Samsara-level cultivators. Sumo couldn't help laughing. The 3 flying ships fanned out and stopped opposite the demonic boat. Their arrangement was interesting. Sumo could see a spirit light between them, vaguely connected. It was a kind of flying ship formation between the star realms. The leading One-Life Immortal Realm peak stage cultivator looked at Sumo and frowned. He couldn't see Sumo and Wu Air's cultivation, but he could see that the demonic boat wasn't ordinary. 5 Decay Realm? The One-Life Immortal Realm peak stage cultivator thought, because there was a 5 Decay Realm above the One-Life Immortal Realm. But such cultivators rarely traveled the star realms. However, there were also some who were fearless with their magic treasures. Sumo and Wu Air's temperament was extraordinary, and they had extraordinary flying treasures. Thus, the first reaction of that peak Immortal Realm expert was that the other party was in the 5th Decay Realm. He had also thought about the rebirth state, but he quickly rejected it, because he saw that the 2 flying ships on his side were safe and sound. Under normal circumstances, if the opponent was a rebirth state cultivator, he could easily destroy a world breaker or sea destroyer cultivator. Now that they didn't, the biggest possibility was that the other party didn't have the strength to destroy them, but their black boat imprisoned 2 of their flying ships. Weren't the 2 flying nets in the void fixed in place by that flying magic treasure? What's going on? Who are you? That peak Immortal Realm expert asked. Lord Shinhu. The cultivator from the Sea Annihilation Realm answered respectfully. They claim to be merchants from the astral world, the 4th Prince's men. They've trapped our flying ship. Oh, the 1,000-man commander frowned when he heard this, and then he cupped his fists towards Sumo and well, you can't speak carelessly. Right now, the flames of war are burning in the Dali realm. If you really are the 4th Prince's men, please surrender. If you choose to submit to the 2nd Prince, His Highness will treat you with respect. The 1,000-man commander's words were polite. Sumo smiled faintly. No matter who I am, I'm afraid you can't stop me. You can't even get within 10 meters of my demonic boat. Don't you see that these 2 broken nets are still floating in the void? With that, Sumo's mind moved. He didn't do anything at all. The flying net whooshed and flew back, covering the 2 flying ships from before. However, Sumo didn't kill them. The 1,000-man commander raised an eyebrow. It seemed that these 2 were not easy to deal with, but he definitely couldn't let them pass through his line of defense. Excuse me. The 1,000-man commander shouted coldly, and at the same time, a white light appeared in his hand. It was a white spear, and it instantly left a tail of light dozens of meters long. Whoosh! The white spear headed straight for Sumo. At the same time, the 2 One-Life Immortal Realm cultivators on the other 2 flying ships also made their moves. They also used a large net, but the color of the net was red. Rebirth-level Dharma treasure. It had to be said that this 1,000-man commander team had come prepared. This kind of Dharma treasure was enough to deal with ordinary rebirth-level cultivators. Unfortunately, their opponent was Sumo. Sumo and Wu Air still stood on the demonic boat without moving. Just as the spear and the flying net were about to reach Sumo, a red light suddenly flew out from Sumo's body. Screech! At the same time, a crimson figure had already flown out with a long howl. Its clothes were as red as blood, and its hair was as black as ink. It was Sumo's crimson puppet, and it was currently facing off against the enemy. The moment the crimson puppet appeared, the entire galaxy was filled with the smell of blood. This was because the crimson puppet carried with it an endless killing intent. To many worlds, it was a power that could destroy the earth. Whoosh, whoosh, the bloody aura suddenly swept out like the wind. The blood-colored aura instantly changed the atmosphere in the surrounding galaxy. The cultivators of the Great Leap Dynasty never thought that they would encounter such an opponent today. The crimson puppet's aura instantly shackled everything. One should know that the crimson puppet was currently at the peak rebirth level. With its powerful physical body, it could almost fight against an ordinary first-stage venerable. Boom! Crack! The crimson puppet waved its hands, and two balls of blood-red light shot out. Under its rebirth power, the two flying nets turned into red butterflies and instantly collapsed. The Great Li Dynasty soldiers were completely stunned. They couldn't explain it, but they could sense that it was the aura of an advanced rebirth-level cultivator. At the same time, the crimson puppet reached out again and grabbed the white spear. The spear was an advanced, immortal-level Dharma treasure. The crimson puppet held it with both hands and exerted force. Crack! The white spear broke into two. The Great Li Dynasty cultivators were dumbfounded by the crimson puppet's powerful performance, and their faces turned ashen. At this moment, they finally understood. What they thought was impossible had happened. The opponent was an existence that they couldn't imagine. Fortunately, Sumo didn't let the crimson puppet start a massacre. Now, the Great Li Dynasty cultivators were like ants in front of Sumo. Sumo didn't even have the desire to kill them. How's the situation in the Great Li Dynasty? Sumo asked indifferently. The Chiliarch looked at Sumo and hesitated for a moment. He didn't want to say it, but he knew that the cultivator in white was at least an advanced rebirth-level cultivator. A cultivator like that probably had too many ways to make them talk. Therefore, he hesitated for a moment, but still said, "The situation is tense." Huh? How so? Sumo smiled. The second prince and the fourth prince are evenly matched? Yes. The Chiliarch was a man of few words, so he nodded. I see. I want to know how Li Beihan's army passed through your defense line that day, Sumo said. Isn't the entire Great Li realm under martial law? His army is enough to turn the tide of the battle. Prince Beihan has the sacred royal token, so of course he can pass through, the Chiliarch said. Oh, Sumo was surprised. He can enter and leave the Great Li realm with the sacred royal token? Of course. The Chiliarch's expression turned serious. The soldiers of the Great Li Dynasty only kill traitors, not the sacred royal. Chapter 902. Only traitors, not the Elysian Emperor. Sumo was slightly taken aback by the words spoken by the thousand-man commander. The moment these words were uttered, the significance of the cultivator's existence had changed. Only traitors, not the Elysian Emperor. Ha. Sumo smiled and nodded. Then, who are the traitors of the Li Dynasty? The fourth prince and his henchmen assassinated the Li Dynasty's crown prince. When the thousand-man commander said this, he met Sumo's gaze directly. He looked as if he was facing death with equanimity. Oh, Sumo looked at the thousand-man commander and said, "Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you for saying such things? I've already said that I'm on the fourth prince's side. If I must die, then I will die for the Li Dynasty without regrets," the thousand-man commander said passionately. Hearing this, Sumo fell silent. Let's hope so. Finally, Sumo nodded again. Then, with a thought, the thousand-man commander saw a flash of black light in front of him. When he looked again, Sumo, Wu-Er, and the red-robed cultivator were long gone. The shackles on their bodies and the ship's shackles suddenly disappeared. Lord Thousand-Man Commander. The other cultivators looked at the Thousand-Man Commander. The Thousand-Man Commander, on the other hand, looked confused. After all, he hadn't even seen how Sumo's ship had left. Peerless experts. Finally, the Thousand-Man Commander sighed in admiration. They're definitely not on the fourth prince's side. If they were, would he spare us? Their realms are unfathomable. The other cultivators nodded. Let's return to camp. The thousand-man commander thought for a moment. Today, we managed to escape with our lives. I'll report what happened to those two cultivators to the general. The other cultivators didn't dare to say anything else. The 5 flying ships turned around and headed back to their camp. Meanwhile, Sumo's magic ship was already millions of kilometers away. They had already passed through the second prince's military defenses. They saw many warships in the interstellar space. The battleships were arranged in an orderly fashion. Xiaolang, according to the distribution of the 13 stars of the Dali realm and the division of their forces, We will most likely run into the Shio army of the fourth prince if we continue forward, Wu Er said. Yes. Sumo smiled and said, previously, we met the second prince's Shio Jun. For the sake of fairness, we should also take a look at the fourth prince. Only the rebels will be executed, not the Saint Emperor, Wu Er said. No matter what, the second prince's soldiers have a good momentum. These words are either sincere or the second prince's way of winning people's hearts. That's right. However, this also shows that the Greatly Saint Emperor is still quite prestigious in the Greatly realm. Sumo said, between the second prince and the fourth prince, they probably have to accuse each other of being the murderer of the first prince. Only then would they have a good reason to attack. Unfortunately, there is only one truth. Wu Er sneered. There must be a portion of Dali soldiers who have been completely used. The meaning of their battle is not what they think it is. Huh. Sumo nodded, then looked at Chi Zi, who had restrained his aura and was standing on the demonic ship. From this point of view, they are actually puppets like Chi Zi. All the realms are like this. It just depends on how those in control command them. Wu Er nodded silently. Sumo's words made sense. All the realms had puppets of all shapes and sizes. The demonic ship moved forward, and, at this time, they had already reached the outer space of a planet in the Greatly realm. Both of their divine senses detected that there was a large interstellar camp not far away. Inside the camp, there were dozens of warships of different sizes docked. From the looks of it, they should be the interstellar garrison of this planet. Boom! Crack! At this moment, there was a sudden loud noise and five-colored light in the interstellar space. Looking again, just a few miles in front of Sumo's demonic ship, a warship suddenly appeared. This warship was far better than the cruising flying ships they had seen before. They were not on the same level at all. The flying ship in front of them was hundreds of feet long, about the same size as the flagships of Hongchun and Yujio in the Dust Luo 3 realms. However, the level of the cultivator on it was far higher than Hongchun and Yujio in the past. A rebirth level cultivator. Sumo chuckled. On that warship stood a rebirth level 3 cultivator. It was a middle-aged cultivator with a square face and a full beard. He only had power. He wore a black armor that emitted a faint black light. Behind him stood a few sea destruction level cultivators. At this time, the rebirth level cultivator also saw Sumo's ship. After all, Sumo did not hide her whereabouts. At this moment, the rebirth level cultivator could not help but raise his eyebrows, because he could not see Sumo in Wu Er's realms. However, the cultivator in red on the ship was emitting rebirth chi. But strangely, the cultivator in red's face was pale and his eyes were lifeless. Moreover, he did not have the aura of a normal cultivator. He was not a real cultivator. A puppet? That rebirth level cultivator was shocked. As a rebirth level cultivator, he had naturally heard of puppet cultivators. After all, Dongi Galaxy's corpseless sect was famous. Corpseless puppets were unparalleled in the world. In terms of puppets, it was not a lie. But why would they appear in the Dali realm of the ancient Lotus Galaxy? Didn't Dongi Galaxy change owners and change its name to Pure Land Galaxy? Moreover, as far as he knew, there were only a few rebirth-level puppets in the entire Chanluo corpseless sect. Why would they appear here? Then who were the other two people? The Samsara warrior pondered. Could they be venerable-level cultivators? However, the Samsara warrior quickly denied this possibility. He was the same as the Dali realm cultivators. They did not believe that rebirth level and above cultivators would suddenly appear in the Dali realm. And they were all familiar with the rebirth level cultivators of the Dali dynasty. Perhaps the rebirth puppets were there to protect them. They were just cultivators who had gone through the 5 blight tribulations. But since they had rebirth level puppets with them, they naturally could not be underestimated. Friends, where did you come from and where are you going? The Samsara warrior cupped his fists. General, we are merchants from the astral world. We came from outside the Dali realm and are heading to the sacred Emperor planet. Sumo answered. Do you have the 4th prince's token? The Samsara warrior asked. No. Sumo smiled. General, if you have the 2nd prince's token, can you come with us? The 2nd prince's token? The Samsara warrior could not help but raise his eyebrows. Because if he had the second prince's token, it meant that he was his enemy. If such a person was really on the second prince's side, then it would be troublesome. Friend, if you really have the second prince's token, you can let me take a look. The Samsara warrior was much calmer than the Dali realm cultivators from before. All right, Sumo smiled and waved his hand. Whoosh, a beam of white light appeared in the void. In an instant, the surrounding starry sky was completely enveloped by a holy aura. All the cultivators on the battleship were shocked. Whoosh, in an instant, all the cultivators on the battleship knelt. Chapter 903. No one was standing on the battleship. Everyone was kneeling. This scene was quite shocking. They were all hot-blooded warriors of the Li dynasty. However, they had clearly seen what the white light that Su-Mo had summoned was. A white-robed figure appeared in the air. It was a peerless man. His robe was whiter than snow, his temperament like a lotus, and his eyes were like water. A faint green halo was emitted from the male cultivator's body. It was untainted by dust and had a natural charm. There was a strange heavenly eye between his brows. However, the heavenly eye was closed and did not open. Holy Lotus. At that moment, all the Li soldiers knelt down to pay their respects. Li General Shun Mohai greets the third prince, the Samsara general said loudly. Shun Mohai was at the third level of the rebirth realm, so he could immediately tell that it was a Holy Lotus spiritual will. The other party had a Holy Lotus spiritual will? Then he must have a powerful background. Shun Mohai, let them pass. I am waiting for them on the sacred Emperor planet. Li Shui's spiritual will said to Shun Mohai. Yes, sir. Shun Mohai was respectful and did not dare to ask anything. With a thought, the battleship immediately moved out of the way. The galactic camp in the distance did not dare to move either. Everything was smoother than Sumo had imagined. Li Shui's spiritual will was unobstructed. At this moment, Sumo was confused about the situation of the Li dynasty. The Sacred Emperor and the Holy Lotus both had such prestige. Why would there be a civil war? Congratulations to the Demon King for recovering your cultivation. Li Shui's spiritual will turned to look at Sumo and smiled. Now that you have summoned my spiritual will, there should be no obstacles in the future. So head north and directly to the galactic camp on the Sacred Emperor planet. I will have Behan come out to welcome you. Thank you, Holy Lotus. Sumo cupped her fists. Demon King, I will await your arrival on the Sacred Emperor planet. That spiritual will was at the peak of the rebirth realm, but to Sumo, it had lost its purpose of protecting him. So, after saying that, Li Shui's spiritual will gradually dissipated. Demon King? At that moment, the Samsara warrior already knew who the cultivator in white was. Demon King of the Three Realms. Naturally, he had heard of it before. However, they did not expect that the Demon King had already recovered his cultivation and was in the ancient Lotus Star sector. Demon King, I've offended you greatly just now. Please forgive me. Shun Mohai said. It's all right. Sumo smiled and asked, General Shun, I just want to ask if I really am the second prince's man, what will you do? Fight to the death and punish the rebels for the country. Shun Mohai said solemnly. Hee. Sumo chuckled, because Shun Mohai's answer was similar to that of the second prince's subordinate. They both saw each other as traitors. General Shun, farewell. Sumo did not say anything else. She then steered the demonic ship towards the northern part of the universe. Shun Mohai looked in the direction where Sumo had left and let out a long sigh. Then, he formed a seal with both hands and used the transportation formation to report this matter to the fourth prince. Although Sumo had the Holy Lotus spiritual will, this was the fourth prince's territory after all. Shun Mohai was the fourth prince's subordinate. Xiaolang, the situation in the Li dynasty is a bit confusing. Wu'er frowned and said, the Holy Emperor and the Holy Lotus both have such prestige. Why did they let them fight each other? Also, the two princes have already fallen. This is definitely not a good thing for the Li dynasty. Yes, Sumo also nodded. I'm also a bit confused. Maybe the second prince and the fourth prince did not want to offend the Holy Lotus. They have already sent orders to their subordinates. The Holy Lotus has maintained a kind of balance. That's why they are like this. However, we will soon see Li Shui, and everything will be clear. Wu Er nodded. The demonic ship flew quickly. At this time, they were still 2 stars away from the Saint Emperor planet. As expected, they did not encounter any obstructions. They did not even see a single flying ship. It seemed that all the flying ships were avoiding this route. Soon, they flew past a star. After going around another star, they could see the Saint Emperor planet. Sumo and Wu Er sat cross-legged on the demonic ship. Their mood was slightly relaxed. In less than half a day, they should be able to reach the Saint Emperor planet. Chi stood behind them like a guard. However, at this moment, Sumo's brows involuntarily twitched. Instantly, a black light flew out from the front left side of the galaxy. The speed of the black light was extremely fast, and it flew out suddenly. It was like a cheetah that had been hibernating here for a long time suddenly saw its prey. Actually, it was a sword energy. Whoosh! At almost the same time, Chi had already made his move. Sumo and Wu Er were still sitting cross-legged without moving. Chi's long robe swung and directly swept towards that sword energy. That was just a sword energy, not a real magic treasure. Boom! Crack! The 2 powerful forces collided and exploded. For a moment, spiritual energy scattered in all directions like dragons and snakes. However, Chi's body did not stop and went straight to the front left. At the same time, a black-clothed cultivator flew out from the front left. This black-clothed cultivator wore a white mask and held a black longsword in his hand. 9 Rebirth Realm. This caused Sumo to be slightly surprised. This kind of cultivator was an absolute expert in the ancient Lotus Realm. Who sent him here? Chi. The longsword pierced through the air, and the rebirth Chi filled the air. Looking again, Chi's long robe swung, and a white arm directly reached out to meet the black sword. The black-clothed cultivator was clearly stunned. He did not expect his opponent's fighting style to be so strange. One must know that the black sword in his hand was a venerable divine weapon. Even a peak rebirth realm cultivator would not dare to face it head-on. Crack! The black-clothed cultivator's long sword directly pierced Chi's arm. With a crisp sound, Chi's arm was cut off. However, Chi's body did not slow down at all. The white bone arm that was cut off actually turned in the air and opened its 5 fingers, heading straight for the black-clothed cultivator's head. Rebirth puppet. At this moment, the black-clothed cultivator finally saw that Chi was a puppet. This was also his fault for being too impatient, and the information he received did not mention rebirth puppets. He was here for the Demon King. However, he was thinking too much. In reality, he was just cannon fodder. Because he could not even get past Chi, how could he get close to Sumo? The black-clothed cultivator once again slashed at Chi's severed arm. His idea was to parry the severed arm. However, his black sword did not have any effect on Chi's severed arm. At this moment, Sumo could not help but smile. Did you refine this Chi again? Where asked. Yes. Sumo smiled and nodded. A product of the soul depository. Pooh! Chi's 5 fingers directly pierced through the black-clothed cultivator's head. Boom! At the last moment, the black-clothed cultivator actually self-destructed the divine weapon in his hand. A powerful force swept out, and a whirlpool suddenly appeared. The self-destruction of a venerable divine weapon could definitely injure Chi. Chi hurriedly retreated. At the same time, the 2 blood-red wings on his back suddenly opened and closed, tightly protecting him. Boom! Rumble! In the air, there was an endless stream of light. Bloodwing Clan. At this moment, a woman's surprised voice came from the distant void. Peek! Chapter 904. The Bloodwing Clan. The voice made Sumo and Wu Er raise their eyebrows. Then, a female cultivator appeared in the distance. She wore a black robe, a black hat, and a black veil. Only a pair of beautiful eyes could be seen. Her eyes were as cold as water. Her entire body seemed to be hidden in the black robe. The peak of the venerable realm. Sumo and Wu Er looked at each other and stood up slowly. This was the highest level cultivator they'd met since entering the ancient Lotus Galaxy. The peak of the Venerable Realm was the highest level of cultivation below the Lotus Realm. They didn't expect that there would be someone like this in the ancient Lotus Realm other than Li Shui. Shen Lang's information didn't mention it. Now, Chi spread his wings, his eyes red. His red robe fluttered in the wind. Chi wasn't an ordinary puppet. The explosion of the divine weapon of the black-robed cultivator had triggered his bloodthirsty instincts. If it weren't for Sumo's control, he would probably pounce on the other party, even if the other party's level was much higher than his. In essence, Scarlet Child was still a living puppet. He wasn't a mortal puppet or a cultivator puppet. Most of the time, he was just a tool for battle. "Who are you?" Sumo asked calmly. "Where did you get your puppet?" The black-robed female cultivator asked coldly instead of answering. "I don't need to tell you where I got my puppet," Sumo said indifferently. "But just now it was your people who wanted to ambush us. I need you to give me an explanation." "Explanation? Huh." The black-robed female cultivator shook her head. "In the Dali realm, who dares to ask me for an explanation? Demon King, do you think this is the Three Realms Galaxy?" "Oh." Sumo couldn't help but smile. "Since you know who I am, you should know that I was invited by the Holy Lotus to go to the Saint Emperor planet. Just now, the two cultivator armies didn't dare to stop me. What does Li Shui's invitation have to do with me?" The black-robed female cultivator said. "Are you the eldest princess of the great Li dynasty?" Sumo said. In the Gulian Dali realm, Sumo couldn't think of a second female cultivator who dared to speak like that. "That's right. I am the eldest princess of the Li dynasty." The black-robed female cultivator nodded. "Forget about the Dali realm. Even in the entire ancient Lotus Galaxy, or even the entire Dust realm, the only person who can control me is the Dali Saint Emperor. Li Water is not qualified." Sumo nodded and smiled. "Then what does Princess Royal want?" "Demon King, if you know what's good for you, then go back to where you came from. There is no need for outsiders to interfere in the affairs of the Li dynasty." The ancient Lotus Galaxy was no longer the East Galaxy. "This place will not become a pure land," said the black-robed female cultivator. "Gulian, there is a path for Gulian." "Oh." Sumo shook her head. "I don't care about Gulian's path. I have never thought of turning this place into a pure land. But I want to see the Holy Lotus. There are some things I want to ask him. After seeing the Holy Lotus, if he says the same thing as you, then I can leave immediately." "Demon King, why must you be so stubborn?" The black-robed female cultivator's voice became even colder. "I can tell you that the Holy Lotus cannot see the path of Gulian clearly. His choice is wrong." Hearing the black-robed female cultivator's words, Sumo chuckled. "Then, it seems that the path you, eldest princess, have chosen is correct?" "Of course," the black-robed female cultivator said proudly. "Because I have the guidance of God. The path of God is the true path. The guidance of God." Hearing this, Sumo couldn't help but frown. Then, she looked at Chi. This was because Chi had said something similar in the past. He had once said that the three realms were in existence abandoned by God. Unfortunately, the current Chi did not have any reaction to the eldest princess words. "Who is God?" asked Sumo. The black-robed female cultivator glanced at Sumo and said with disdain, "The departed world soul is not worthy to know the name of God." Departed world soul? When Sumo heard these words, she couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and her cheeks tightened. At that moment, these words really stung Sumo. Departed world soul, that's right. Sumo spat out a mouthful of turbid air, but she didn't attack. Instead, she remained silent for a while, because at that moment, she remembered the struggle between her and Songhai, the struggle between her and AMU. But what happened in the end? Reincarnation or eternal life? Which one was right? Who could say for sure now? Within the infinite worlds, there were many things that didn't have a real answer. Right and wrong were relative. Time flowed. Right could be wrong. Wrong could be right. Eldest princess, one day, you might understand that your words today are childish and ridiculous. Sumo lightly said, "Today, I will give face to the holy lotus and let you go. Please get out of the way. Hee. The black-robed eldest princess smiled coldly. Demon King, the one who should leave is you. I am standing in the starry sky of my Dali dynasty. Why do you have to ask me to get out of the way? Today you can leave, but he... With that, the black-robed eldest princess pointed at the crimson puppet. He has to stay. Why he has to stay? Because he is from a Bloodwing clan? Sumo asked. You have too many questions. The black-robed eldest princess said. But, eldest princess, Sumo's voice was very calm. Do you have the ability to make him stay? Demon King, I will say it again, this is the Gulian Dali realm, not the Three Realms galaxy. After saying that, the black-robed eldest princess's black robe fluttered, and spiritual energy surged. Around her, there was an extremely strange brilliance instantly rolling. At the same time, the two Dali stars closest to Sumo glowed with a strange light. The light crisscrossed and pointed to the starry sky. Star formation. The corners of Sumo's mouth curled up coldly. It seemed that this eldest princess wanted to use the power of her home ground to stop her, because she had already mobilized the power of the two stars of the Dali realm. Eldest princess, you are very generous. Sumo said. Demon King, I am sorry. The black-robed eldest princess opened her hands. The aura of the peak of the venerable realm instantly spread out. The crimson puppet could not help but step back and land on the demonic boat, because that kind of aura was already not something that he could resist. Whoosh, whoosh, suddenly the starry sky was like the sea, and spiritual energy was like waves. Looking again, behind the black-robed eldest princess gradually appeared 7 cultivators. They were all wearing red robes, red hats, and snow-white masks. There was a strange spiritual energy fluctuation on their bodies, and they were one with everything around them. Sumo actually could not see their realm. Red Ghost Warrior. War could not help but be shocked. Sumo was stunned, because he had never heard of a Red Ghost Warrior. In the first hidden realm, there are 3 kinds of strange cultivators: the Silent Souls, the Red Ghost Warriors, and the Black Lotus Warriors. You have seen the Silent Souls. Shun Lang and the others are. The Red Ghost Warriors should be them. They are not real cultivators, and they are not completely puppets, but existences in between. The Red Ghost Warriors are in the same realm as the Master. They are the same as the Silent Souls. As long as the Master does not die, they will not be destroyed, and they do not need to cultivate at all. They are extremely terrifying killers. Wu Er said. Peak. Chapter 905. Red Wraith cultivators were all assassins. No wonder the eldest princess of Dali dared to intercept Sumo. Red Ghost Warrior was in the same realm as the Master. Didn't that mean that Sumo and Wu would have to face 8 peak stage venerables? At that moment, Sumo frowned slightly. At the same time, the lotus vine appeared in his hand. Against 8 opponents of the same level, Sumo did not dare to be careless. At this moment, Wu Er opened one of her hands. A strange divine weapon appeared in her hand. It looked like a spear, but there was a pair of wings on both sides of the spearhead. The pair of wings were 3 feet long, but they were as thin as cicada wings. Kuan Butterfly Spear. When the eldest princess of the Great Li dynasty saw this, her expression changed slightly. Then, she looked at Wu Er and frowned. You're actually from the Kuan Butterfly clan? That's right. Wu Er smiled lightly. Then you can leave too, the Grand Princess of Dali said. Hee. Wu Er shook her head. How could that be? Why not? The eldest princess of Dali looked at Wu Er coldly. At that moment, Wu Er's answer seemed to make his heart go cold. Because Xiao Lang and I naturally have to advance and retreat together, Wu Er said. Hee. The eldest princess's black robe fluttered in the wind. Her beautiful eyes were filled with cold pity. Women are always so pitiful and ridiculous. One day, you will understand that everything is not worth it. Wu Er smiled faintly and remained unmoved. Set up the formation. The eldest princess of Dali dynasty commanded coldly. Who? the 7 red ghost cultivators behind her suddenly disappeared. In the next instant, they had already surrounded the magic arc. Between them, there was a red light that connected them. In the entire interstellar space, the chi of paragons seemed to have sealed everything. Sumo didn't put away AIZ. Instead, she let him stand on the magic boat. Sumo held Wu Er's hand, just like how she had once held Mu Jinghong's hand. Wu Er, we're going to fight side by side again. Sumo smiled. Xiaolang, you are fortunate to be born. Wu Er smiled sweetly. Then, the two of them stood back to back. Their expressions were calm and composed. In fact, they were at a disadvantage in terms of strength. After all, including the eldest princess, there were 8 top-grade venerable ones. However, they were not afraid at all. They even believed in their hearts that they would win. That kind of thought came from the person standing behind them who they love the most. Even if I die, I have no regrets. The eldest princess of Dali Dynasty looked at Sumo and Wu Er with an inexplicable emotion, because that was the scene that she was most unwilling to see, and also the scene that she most wished to see. Why did all of that happen to others? Kill! The eldest princess of Dali roared. Who? The 7 red wraith cultivators attacked at the same time. However, they advanced 3 times and retreated 4 times. Among them, 3 cultivators advanced while 4 cultivators retreated. It was a very special attack method. The 3 red wraith cultivators in front all wielded swords, blood-colored swords. Each sword was a venerable divine weapon. They're exactly the same. As for the other 4 cultivators, black shields appeared in their hands. On each shield, there was a black lotus flower floating on it. Black lotus. It was very special. The eldest princess of Dali Dynasty actually had such a force under her command, which was beyond Sumo's expectations. The swords of the 3 red wraith cultivators stabbed at Sumo, Wu Er, and Chizi respectively. They were like 3 red lightning bolts. It must be said that their swords were not inferior to the sword of Swordsman 13 that day. Sumo had already made his move. This time, he didn't use the Koan Soul Blade. Instead, he raised the Lotus Vine in his hand. One should know that the Lotus Vine was also a top-grade soul treasure, and it could control a larger range. Crack! Boom! Sumo faced 2 of the swords head-on. He had to block the sword for Chi-Zi. However, the moment Sumo made his move, the 2 red wraith cultivators disappeared again. Their movement technique was truly ghostly. The ones who appeared in front of Sumo's Lotus Vine were 2 red wraith cultivators with shields. Boom! Sumo's Lotus Vine hit the black lotus shields of the 2 red wraith cultivators. In an instant, green light exploded like fireworks. The power of the venerable realm canceled each other out, but it still created a whirlpool of interstellar spiritual energy. Looking from afar, one could see countless rays of light that looked like goat horns soaring into the starry sky. This was definitely a battle between venerables. On the other side, Wu Er's Kuan butterfly spear met the sword of the red wraith swordsman. Wu Er was a 7-stage venerable, so in theory, she was at a disadvantage. However, the Kuan butterfly spear in her hand was Lianbua. Although it couldn't compare to the Kuan Soul Blade, it was still a treasure of the Kuan butterfly clan. It was given to Wu Er by the Immortal Lotus clan, so it couldn't be compared to ordinary venerable weapons. Boom! Crack! The red wraith cultivator didn't disappear. Instead, he took Wu Er's spear head-on. It seemed that they had their own estimation of Wu Er's strength. A cold smile appeared on Wu Er's face. The power of the venerable realm clashed. However, nothing like what happened to Sumo's side. As soon as the spiritual energy whirlpool appeared, the 2 wings on the Kuan butterfly spear suddenly flapped. Whoosh! The spiritual energy whirlpool in the air was drawn by it, and turned into a sword that pierced toward the red wraith cultivator. This was definitely out of the red wraith's opponent's expectation. The red wraith cultivator exclaimed. However, he couldn't evade it anymore. Whoosh! The illusory long sword pierced through his body in an instant. At the same time, Wu Er's spell arrived. She raised her hand and instantly stirred up the red sand in the air. It was the spell that Red Robe Mu Jinghong had used in the past. However, Wu Er's realm was worlds apart from back then. The boundless mortal world blotted out the sky. At that moment, the demonic arc was almost invisible. In the distance, the great Li's crown princess narrowed her eyes, but she didn't move at all. Whoosh! In the mortal world, Wu Er leaped into the air. The spear in her hand swept out like a long staff. However, the wings on the spearhead instantly expanded. Puff! The wings were like a long blade that directly cut the red wraith cultivator in half. This was something that no one present had expected. Sumo was shocked. Wu Er's battle prowess was above what he had expected. Whoosh! The red wraith cultivator instantly turned into red smoke. However, at that moment, the two red wraith cultivators who had disappeared in front of Sumo stabbed the swords in their hands silently at Wu Er's back. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. However, Wu Er didn't even turn around, because he had Sumo behind him. Sure enough, as soon as the two red swords appeared, the lotus vines in Sumo's hand had already rolled back. Crack! The two red wraith cultivators didn't dodge. Instead, they seemed to be risking their lives to injure Wu Er. However, they were taking it for granted. Sumo definitely wouldn't give them the chance to do so. Boom! The lotus vines hit the two red wraith cultivators. A peak venerable wielding a lianbua. Even a lotus knight would have to retreat from such power. So how could two peak venerables withstand it? The red light exploded, and the two red wraith cultivators turned into red smoke at the same time. In just 3 moves, 3 red wraith cultivators were defeated. Everything seemed to be going quite smoothly. However, the great Li's crown princess sneered in the distance. She formed a seal with her hands. Whoosh! Whoosh! The entire void surged with spiritual power like a tidal wave. Looking around, the remaining 4 red wraith cultivators hurriedly retreated. In the process of retreating, a red light flashed in front of them. The 3 red wraith cultivators that had been defeated just now reappeared. The red wraith cultivators were of the same realm as their masters. As long as their masters were alive, they would not perish. At that moment, Sumo and Wu Er couldn't help but frown slightly. Then they turned to look at the great Li's crown princess. Apex. Chapter 906. As long as their master was alive, the red ghosts would not rest. Sumo and Wu Er killed 3 red ghost cultivators in a row, but to no avail. This was a situation they had overlooked before. You two have no chance of winning, the Li's eldest princess said coldly. Sumo shook her head and smiled. Eldest princess, I didn't want to hurt you for the sake of the sacred lotus, but now that things have come to this, I don't have much to worry about. Your star formation is meaningless to me. Then you can try again. The Li's eldest princess separated her hands. The power of the 2 stars burst forth again. In a sense, this part of the starry sky had been completely sealed off. The 7 red ghost cultivators seemed to have absorbed more power. Their bodies glowed red, like dragons soaring into the sky. Sumo smiled coldly, then moved her mind. The yin-yang bell flew out of her cosmic pouch. This was Sumo's most powerful lianbua, which attacked indiscriminately. Once, in the Dead Souls galaxy, 1 bell could destroy a star. Clang. Sumo exhaled spiritual energy and lightly shook the yin-yang bell. The sound of the bell seemed to come from the ancient times, carrying with it an aura of endless vicissitudes. They were like layers of waves, spreading outward. At the same time, countless blood roses appeared on the demonic arc. Those blood roses surrounded the demonic arc. Red and black formed a kind of eerie beauty. White and green seemed to be the last light of this world. At that moment, Li's eldest princess frowned slightly. The bell looked extremely old, but she didn't recognize it. It was mottled with rust, but half of its ancient rust had fallen off. Its divine light was restrained, full of traces of time. Eldest princess, this bell is called the yin-yang bell. It can end life and sentence death. I will ask you one last time. Will you retreat? Sumo said coldly. Ha! Li couldn't help but laugh. Demon King, it's useless to say more. I defend my Tao. Why should I retreat? With that, Li waved her hand. Whoosh! 3 of the 7 red ghost cultivators went straight for Sumo again. The other 4 were still behind. The sword and the shield were always at the front and the back. Xiaolang, these 7 red ghost cultivators are a bit strange. It seems like they can attack at the same time. At most, 3 people can attack at a time. Wu secretly transmitted her voice. And, Sumo replied, there's a red light connecting them to each other, so it's likely that they can switch to each other. 3 corporeal and 4 illusions. However, it didn't matter. I don't believe that they could defeat the yin-yang bell. The conversation between the two was extremely quick. At this point, the 3 red wraith cultivators were heading straight for them. However, this time they did not attack separately. Instead, they lined up in a row. 3 swordsmen were at the front, and 4 shield-wielding guards were at the back. That was definitely a special tactic, not a normal attack formation. Sumo didn't care about that. The lotus vine in his hand shook violently and turned into a long whip. However, the whip was not aimed at the 7 red ghost cultivators, but at the yin-yang bell instead. Pa-boom! The lotus vine and the yin-yang bell were both lianbua. The power of these 2 treasures instantly overlapped. Hum, hum, clank. When the yin-yang bell rang, all eternity fell silent. In an instant, the entire galaxy was filled with dust. They were in the shape of waves, rolling like the tide, and in an instant they were thousands of feet high. At this moment, the yin-yang bell seemed to recreate the mountains and seas in the galaxy. Its power was unstoppable. The Grand Princess of Dali would never have thought that Sumo would have such a powerful Yanbua. Such power could almost rival the Lotus Warriors. Boom! Bang! Bang! The first 3 of the 7 red ghost cultivators were instantly killed by the sound waves of the yin-yang bell. The other 4 red ghost cultivators retreated with all their might. The black shields in their hands emitted a black brilliance. Boom! However, the 4th red ghost cultivator was still defeated by the sound waves. However, the black shield in his hand turned into a black light and returned to the Grand Princess of Dali. Huh. At this moment, Sumo couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. What was going on? Why did the black shield turn into a black light and return to the Grand Princess? Those were all her clones? At the same time, the remaining 3 shield-wielding cultivators all took the opportunity to retreat behind the Grand Princess of Dali. Clang! However, the yin-yang bell didn't stop ringing. The sound waves rolled directly towards the Grand Princess of Dali. At this moment, the Grand Princess of Dali had already formed a seal with both hands. Her eyes were cold and determined, without the slightest fear. Suddenly, the blood-red robes of the 3 red ghost cultivators behind her changed color. Their red robes became black robes. However, this black robe was different from the one that tried to assassinate Sumo. On that black robe, there was an incomparably large black lotus embroidered on it. Black Lotus Warrior? Wu couldn't help but exclaim. There were 3 special cultivators in Yizong: the Silent Soul, the Red Ghost, and the Black Lotus Warrior. The first 2 were widely recorded, but the Black Lotus Warrior was only a legend. No one seemed to have actually seen it. The Black Lotus Warriors were marked by black lotuses. This was a legend of Yizong. Black lotuses seemed to represent some kind of mysterious power. However, Wu didn't expect there to be such a connection between the Red Ghost and the Black Lotus. At this moment, the Grand Princess of Dali's eyes had turned pitch black. They were similar to Sumo's demon eyes. The sound of the yin-yang bell went straight for the Grand Princess. OM, OM, OM. However, at that moment, the Grand Princess seemed to have changed into a completely different person. She muttered an incantation as if she was possessed by a demonic god. Her long hair slowly fluttered. Her black robe fluttered like the wind. Boom! Crack! When they looked again, a black lotus directly appeared between the Grand Princess's eyebrows. This black lotus was filled with a kind of bewitching beauty. Black lotuses always gave off the feeling of the end of the world. OM! Ding! Then something strange happened. The sound of the yin-yang bell actually gradually faded under the Grand Princess incantation. She actually broke the yin-yang bell's technique. At the same time, black lotuses also appeared between the eyebrows of the 3 red ghost cultivators behind her. Then, the three Black Lotus warriors began to dissipate. They turned into black light and returned to the Grand Princess's body. It was like all rivers returning to the sea. The Grand Princess's realm actually began to increase. It was an extremely wondrous feeling. In truth, she was already at the peak of Venerable Realm, and above that was the Lotus Realm. However, at that moment, she wasn't a true Lotus warrior, but she had already surpassed the peak of Venerable Realm. The ethereal Lotus Realm? Wu said softly. After all, Wu had cultivated in the Kuan butterfly mystic realm for millions of years. Her understanding of Lotus warriors was far above that of Sumo. Sumo, this Grand Princess is not a normal cultivator. Use the Kuan Soul Saber and kill her. If you delay, something unexpected will happen. Yes, Sumo nodded. He also didn't expect that the Grand Princess of the Great Li Dynasty actually had a way to restrain the Yin-Yang bell. Then he spread out one hand. The Kuan Soul Saber was already in his hand. At this moment, the star formation formed a barrier, and the sound of the bell turned into waves. Sumo and Wu were still on the demonic boat, and opposite them was the demonic Grand Princess. Sumo was dressed in white, and the Grand Princess was dressed in a black robe. Between the white and black, Sumo suddenly raised the Kuan Soul Saber. The saber cut through the sky. Chapter 907. When the Kuan Soul blade was drawn, heaven and earth shook. That blade was enough to change the expression of a Lotus warrior. Guanxi Lake. Everything that had happened to Su Mo had always been reflected in the Guanxi Lake. Bai Yifeng watched everything without blinking. Because everything that happened in Sumo's world happened in Luo Fan Town in just a moment. That's the Black Lotus? Bai Yifeng asked Mr. Ren. It's just a projection of the Black Lotus. Mr. Ren smiled. How can the real Black Lotus appear in Yizong world? Bai Yifeng nodded, then raised her eyebrows. If the Black Lotus branch really dares to touch my junior brother, I will leave Luo Fan Town and descend to the lower realm again. Huh? Mr. Ren was speechless and didn't know how to answer. Don't worry, if that's the case. I know what I'm doing. Bai Yifeng looked at Mr. Ren and said, I won't cause any trouble for the Eastern Hedge branch. Miss Bai, I'm not worried. Mr. Ren could only nod. Moreover, Lysimachia chinensis is still traveling in Yizong. If it's really a critical moment, I don't believe that he can still stay out of it and play games. Actually, without his indulgence, how would there be the chaos of the Black Lotus? I hope so. Bai Yifeng nodded and then said, Mr. Ren, it doesn't seem easy for you to be the enforcer outside White Mountain, right? Hee. Mr. Ren shook his head and smiled bitterly. What's good to do in the various realms? Isn't it the same for the Windwheel branch? Other than White Mountain, what else can we ask for? Even if it's Luo Fan Town, how can it be completely free? That makes sense. Bai Yifeng smiled faintly and took another look at Guanxi Lake. That Mu Jinghong is indeed a good woman. From the looks of it, junior brother should be fine. But Mr. Ren, I have a request. Miss Bai, please speak. Mr. Ren said, My junior brother has experienced many tribulations, and at the same time, it concerns the destiny of the entire windmill. Mr. Ren was in charge of the World Observation Lake and could see all the worlds. I'll have to trouble you to pay more attention to my junior brother. If he has a horse to ride, please let me know. As for the rest, I don't need to trouble you, young master. Bai Yifeng said. Sure. Mr. Ren immediately agreed. Miss Bai, don't worry. I'll remember what you've entrusted me with. Yes. Yifeng thanks Mr. Ren in advance. Bai Yifeng bowed slightly to Mr. Ren. Bai Yifeng was proud and arrogant, and she was famous in the entire Fallen Fan Town. Usually, other than those senior brothers of Windmill, when had Bai Yifeng ever bowed to anyone, Mr. Ren was flattered by Bai Yifeng's bow. Don't mention it, Miss Bai. Mr. Ren hurriedly returned the bow. Mr. Ren, stop the spell. Bai Yifeng said, I promised the senior brothers that I'll bring back a few celestial fishes today. That's easy. Mr. Ren smiled. Mr. Ren waved his hand, and the entire lake instantly returned to its original state. He waved the fishing rod in his hand lightly. That fishing rod was a top-grade liembua. A silver line flashed, and the hook was like a moon. It swept across the surface of the lake lightly, and fish were hooked, and it was a nine-tailed celestial fish that were connected head to tail. The nine-tailed celestial fish was shining with golden light, and it was very beautiful. Whoosh! Mr. Wren shook his wrist, and the nine-tailed celestial fish turned into a circle in the void like a golden sun. Miss Bai Yifeng understood and shook the bamboo basket in her hand lightly. The bamboo basket flew into the air, and the nine-tailed celestial fish entered one by one. Then, the bamboo basket returned to Bai Yifeng's hand. Looking at the ripples in the bamboo basket, the nine-tailed celestial fish had shrunk to 70% of their original size. Bai Yifeng said, "The celestial fishes of Goddess Lake can all descend to the lower realm and turn into dragons. This time, it's our windmill who's greedy." "What are you talking about, Miss Bai?" Mr. Wren said sincerely. "These fish are all raised by me. It's my honor that Miss Bai is willing to give me face and take the fish." Mr. Wren's words were straightforward, and Bai Yifeng couldn't help but blush. Mr. Wren is a peerless figure. Bai Yifeng smiled and said, "The goddess fish are priceless treasures. I most likely don't have what Mr. Wren needs here, so I can only give Mr. Wren an array map as a token of my sincerity." As she spoke, Bai Yifeng opened her hand, and a bamboo scroll appeared in her hand. The bamboo scroll emitted a faint brilliance, and at the same time, it emitted an ancient aura. In terms of arrays, Bai Yifeng could be said to be number 1 in Fallen Mortal. Even if the scholar's magical brush set up an array, it probably wouldn't be able to trap Bai Yifeng. In the entire Fallen Mortal town, probably only the Milky Way's forbidden array map could be compared to her array. So, this array map of Bai Yifeng was definitely a priceless treasure. However, Mr. Wren only smiled at the array map and wasn't moved at all. "Oh." Bai Yifeng couldn't help but look at Mr. Wren in a daze. "Why? This array map isn't comparable to the nine-tailed celestial fish?" "That's not it." Mr. Wren shook his head and smiled. "This nine-tailed celestial fish is a gift from me to Miss Bai, so Miss Bai doesn't need to reciprocate." "That won't do." Bai Yifeng shook her head. "These celestial fishes are all divine objects. How can I accept Mr. Wren's kindness for nothing? If you don't accept this array map, then I can't accept these celestial fishes." Her. Mr. Wren shook his head and laughed. "If Miss Bai insists on reciprocating, I do want an item. I wonder if Miss Bai is willing to give it to me?" "Oh." Bai Yifeng went into a blank. "What does Mr. Wren want?" Mr. Wren paused for a moment before replying. "If I'm rude, please don't blame me, Miss Bai." "Young master, please speak." Bai Yifeng replied. "I want that sachet on Miss Bai's waist," Mr. Wren said as he pointed at Bai Yifeng's waist. "I wonder if Miss Bai is willing to part with it?" Bai Yifeng's long hair reached her waist. A colorful four-cornered sachet hung on her waist, looking rather exquisite. Bai Yifeng couldn't help but frowned. "Mr. Wren, although this sachet can ward off all poisons and illusions, but its value absolutely cannot be compared to the array map in my hands." Her. Mr. Wren gave a faint smile. "I'm not interested in its value, but because it's Miss Bai's personal item. With this item on you, it can make you yearn for it in silence." Instantly, Bai Yifeng's cheeks flushed red. Mr. Wren liked Bai Yifeng, and it wasn't a secret in Luo Fan Town. This was also the reason why Bai Yifeng practically didn't come to Guanshu Lake. But she had not expected Mr. Wren to express his feelings so straightforwardly. Momentarily, Bai Yifeng couldn't help but went into a slight daze. After all, Mr. Wren liked her and had never mentioned it personally before. In terms of character and cultivation, Mr. Wren was absolutely a top-rated existence in Luo Fan Town. Actually, when one's cultivation reached their level, they would usually have cut off all feelings, and their state of mind was like water. But Mr. Wren actually had such an obsession. This feeling was indeed hard to come by, but it was also a demonic barrier. Bai Yifeng took a deep breath and calmed herself down before she looked at Mr. Wren and said, "Since young master is interested, then I'll gift this sachet to young master. But I hope that young master will take good care of it." "Don't worry, Miss Bai." Mr. Wren beamed with joy, because earlier his heart was extremely perturbed. In front of one's loved ones, anyone would be afraid. Top-rated Lotus warriors were no exception. I'm here, the sachet is here. Mr. Ren's expression was certain, as though he was making a vow. Bai Yifeng smiled sweetly and then waved her hand. That sachet was already taken off. That sachet gave off a faint fragrance, and on it was a strand of her hair. But Bai Yifeng didn't take it off. The sachet landed in Mr. Ren's hands. Bai Yifeng didn't say anything else. She waved her hand, and the bamboo scroll of the array map also landed in front of Mr. Ren. Mr. Ren, this array map is still for you. With that, Bai Yifeng turned around and walked away slowly. Miss Bai, can I send you fish in the windmill village in the future? Mr. Ren looked at Bai Yifeng's slender back and asked loudly. Sure. Bai Yifeng's voice drifted over faintly. It was soft but very natural. By the observation lake, Mr. Ren held the sachet in his hand and watched the beauty leave. At the peak. Chapter 908. Sending her off with his eyes, Mr. Ren was slightly disappointed and frustrated. Haha, congratulations, Brother Ren. Whereas at this moment, Scholar Dongli walked over from another path with a grin on his face. He was still waving his folding fan, swaying 3 times with each step. Scholar was still as flirtatious as ever. Oh, what's there to be happy about? Mr. Ren kept the sachet as he pretended to be nonchalant. Could it be that I've touched the door to the true law realm? Hee. Fishing, you and I are still acting dumb. Scholar walked to the front of Mr. Ren and said, You won't be able to touch the door to the true law realm in a short period of time, but you've captured the beauty's heart. Isn't that a happy event? Hee. Mr. Ren replied. Courtesy demands reciprocity. Courtesy demands reciprocity? Scholar looked at Mr. Ren in disdain. Bai Yifeng even gave you her sachet. Is this still considered reciprocity? She's not a person who's easy to talk to. If she had no intentions towards you, she would absolutely not give you that sachet. Hee. This time Mr. Ren didn't refute, but only laughed. But, speaking of which, how about the array map that Bai Yifeng gave you? Scholar asked again. His eyes were only fixated on the bamboo slip in Mr. Ren's hand. Why? Turns out that you want to see this formation diagram. Young Master Ren said with a smile. Of course. Who in the entire Luo fan town doesn't want to see the wind wheel, one Phoenix's array map? Good things should be shared by good brothers. Scholar smiled. Looks like the next time, I have to build a good relationship with Miss Bai. She's much more generous than her second senior brother. Last time when I helped her junior brother to become an honorable martial artist, she actually said that I won the bet once, and there's no benefit at all. Sigh. Hee. Mr. Ren laughed and flipped his hand. That bamboo slip disappeared directly. AI. Scholar took a look and cried out, Fisherman, why are you so petty? I won't borrow Miss Bai's personal belongings, so why not lend me that array map to study? Miss Bai asked me to pay attention to her junior brother. In that case, if there's anything that I need your help with in the future, I'll lend you this bamboo slip if you're willing to help. What do you think? Asked Mr. Ren. That's not a problem. The scholar patted his chest and said, However, can you let me look at the array diagram first before helping? Of course not. Mr. Ren refused directly. After that, Mr. Ren turned around and continued fishing, no longer talking nonsense with the scholar. Actually, what he was fishing for was not a fish, but a state of mind. However, today was different. Sigh. Prioritizing a lover over a friend. The scholar pretended to be in pain as he shook his head and sighed. However, the way the scholar looked at Mr. Ren was extremely gentle. It was a kind of sincere friendship. He knew that Bai Yifeng's response was the greatest gift to Mr. Ren. The demonic barrier in Mr. Ren's heart finally began to loosen. The true law realm might be able to do so. The scholar was very happy for Mr. Ren. The Easternly clan enforced all realms. There were special existences in Luo Fan Town. Every one of them had their own story, but they rarely told it to others. They were, in fact, the Great Loners. The Dali realm. The Kuan soul blade headed straight for the eldest princess. At that moment, the Kuan soul blade's light poured down like a long river, its power unstoppable. Between black and white, the Kuan soul blade cut through everything. The eldest princess's body was still glowing with black light. She muttered something. The strange spell dispelled the sound waves of the yin-yang bell, but could not dispel the power of the Kuan Soul Blade. This was actually a little strange. In terms of attack power, the Kuan Soul Blade might be slightly better than the yin-yang bell, because its light was more concentrated. However, the spell that could easily dispel the yin-yang bell was completely ineffective against the Kuan Soul Blade. Whoosh, whoosh, the eldest princess's figure moved and retreated several miles. But Sumo's Kuan Soul Blade followed her like a shadow. Boom! The three Black Lotus warriors behind the eldest princess actually formed a triangular formation and met Sumo's blade light. The result was unquestionable. The three peak venerables all turned into black smoke under the Kuan Soul Blade. The Kuan Butterfly Blade could kill Lotus warriors, so what about venerables? However, they were able to block Sumo's blade slightly. At the same time, their dissipated black light directly returned to the eldest princess's brow. At that moment, the black lotus on the eldest princess's brow actually protruded. The eldest princess slowly pulled it out. The black lotus was 1 foot and 9 inches long, as if it was carved from black jade. The eldest princess's hood had long since fallen off, her long hair flying in the wind. Her face was still covered by a black veil, but her beautiful eyes were dark and cold. She kept chanting, and at the same time, she gently pinched the black lotus with one hand. The black lotus flashed with an eerie light. Looking again, she waved the black lotus in her hand. Whoosh! The black lotus was like a sword, sweeping up thousands of miles of black light, directly meeting the Kuan Soul Blade light. Boom! Crack! Boom! This confrontation was far more powerful than all the previous collisions of power. The black light scattered, and mushroom-like clouds rose into the sky. Outside the demonic boat, the blood roses surged like the sea, dispelling the power of the aftermath. It should be said that, apart from Lucidum, this was the strongest opponent Sumo had encountered. This was the ethereal Lotus Realm. However, Sumo's figure did not retreat at all. His white robe was like snow, fluttering in the wind. The Kuan Soul Blade in his hand emitted bursts of green light. Sumo's hand was very natural. His movements were still calm. However, a strong murderous intent flashed in his eyes, because on his left hand, light golden blood began to ooze out. The eldest princess's black lotus was indeed extraordinary. That black lotus was also a rare lianbua. However, the eldest princess's body retreated very far. The black light in her eyes was slightly dim. At the same time, her body also slightly bent, and blood also seeped out of the black veil. Obviously, her injury was more serious. In this strike, Sumo still had the upper hand. Eldest princess, I don't care where your power comes from. However, my second strike will take your life, Sumo said calmly. The eldest princess of the Li dynasty, smiled strangely, but did not speak. Then, she held the black lotus in one hand and formed a seal with the other. That kind of seal was quite strange. Neither Sumo nor Wu had seen it before. The eldest princess's eyes turned dark again. Her eyebrows glowed with black light. The black lotus mark was no longer there, but it formed a black vortex. In an instant, the eldest princess's power began to gradually recover. Sumo could not help but frown. Sumo, Wu reminded, she is not an ordinary cultivator. She is like an ancient contractor. Whoosh! At this moment, Sumo raised the blade in his hand again. At the same time, Sumo's mind moved, and the forbidden map appeared under his feet. He would definitely take the eldest princess's life with this strike. The eldest princess also raised the black lotus in her hand. However, her aura was completely inferior to Sumo's. Her power seemed to be forcibly extracted, without any aftereffects. Sumo's eyes narrowed slightly, and the forbidden map under his feet rippled. However, Sumo had not activated the forbidden map yet. He was about to make his move. However, at this moment, a white light suddenly flew over from the void. Someone hurriedly shouted, "Demon King, please show mercy." Chapter 909. Demon King, please have mercy. Sumo's saber involuntarily paused. By then, the white light had reached between Sumo and the eldest princess and turned into a cultivator in white. It was none other than Li Beihan, the crown prince of Dali. Li Beihan didn't speak to Sumo right away. Instead, he knelt to the eldest princess and said, "Beihan greets you, grand aunt." The eldest princess of Dali frowned slightly. The black light in her eyes dimmed a little. "Li Beihan, are you trying to stop me from killing?" "I wouldn't dare," Li Beihan said respectfully and slowly rose to his feet. "Even if your father were here, he wouldn't be able to control me, let alone you," the eldest princess of Dali said coldly. "I understand." Li Beihan didn't argue. "But I'm here on the orders of the Elysian Emperor." "What?" The eldest princess shuddered and said in a trembling voice, "Li Beihan, if you dare to falsify the Elysian Emperor's edict, I'll kill you right away." "You worry too much." Li Beihan smiled helplessly. "How would I dare? If you don't believe me, I have the Elysian Emperor's token here." With that, Li Beihan shook his hand. Whoosh! A token appeared in Li Beihan's hand, shining with golden light. The words Dali and a golden lotus were engraved on the token. The Elysian Emperor's token. The eldest princess was shocked. There was only one Elysian Emperor's token in the entire Li dynasty. It had always been in the Elysian Emperor's hands. The Elysian Emperor's token wasn't just a token, but also a lianbua. However, only the Elysian Emperors of the past could control it. "Why is the Elysian Emperor's token in your hands?" the eldest princess asked. "Beihan is here on the Elysian Emperor's order to invite the eldest princess back to the Li Palace," Li Beihan said loudly while holding the token. "Ha ha ha." The eldest princess looked at the token, her eyes flashing. "I want to see the Elysian Emperor himself. This is the only token I have. I won't obey the edict." "You." Li Beihan held the token as if the Elysian Emperor had come in person. He didn't expect the eldest princess to refuse. However, there was nothing Li Beihan could do to the eldest princess. Sigh. Right at this moment, a long sigh came from the Saint Royal Medallion, following which the sacred royal medallion shone with golden light. Within the golden light, a middle-aged cultivator appeared. He wore a golden robe and a crown on his head. Lotus warrior. The might of a king was completely revealed. However, his eyes were filled with the vicissitudes of life, and his temples were actually grizzled white. "Greetings, Elysian Emperor." Li Beihan was taken aback at first, but then he dropped to one knee. He did not expect that the sacred royal token would actually contain the divine sense of a sacred emperor. But thinking about it, if the sacred royal medallion didn't contain the sacred royal divine sense, it would definitely be chaotic if it fell into the hands of someone with ulterior motives. "Beihan, don't stand on ceremony." The Dali Saint Emperor's voice was filled with exhaustion and vicissitudes. He then turned to look at the eldest princess of Dali. "That's enough, Ali. How much longer are you going to make a fuss?" At that moment, the eldest princess of Dali looked at the Saint Emperor of Dali. Just now, when the Saint Emperor's divine sense appeared, the pitch-black light in her eyes had completely dissipated. Her gaze instantly became clear, but it was still ice-cold. "Your Majesty, you're finally willing to show yourself?" The eldest princess's voice was very calm, but it was obvious that she was trying to control herself. "You're finally willing to see me?" The Saint Emperor of Dali looked at the eldest princess with a complicated expression. "Ali, go back to the palace." "Ha ha ha." The eldest princess's laugh was cold and desolate. "Go back to the palace?" Back to the lifeless Zhenli palace that was cold every day like a giant coffin? "Your Majesty, I would like to ask if that was the palace you built for me, or a tomb." "Ali." The Saint Emperor of Dali raised an eyebrow and focused his eyes as if he was about to lose his temper, but he suppressed it in the end. Then he softened his tone and said, "Back then, I didn't allow you to take even half a step out of Zhenli planet. And you promised me that? Do you remember?" "Huh." Back then, the eldest princess looked at the Saint Emperor, her beautiful eyes like a 10,000-year-old cave of ice. "Back then, you said that you wouldn't show yourself for 3 million years?" "Back then, you said that you would let me be alone on Zhenli planet? Back then, the eldest princess's black robe billowed, and her tone was bone-chilling. But she didn't continue. Most of the time, words were the weakest. No words could diminish the pain and suffering she had endured for more than 3 million years. Your Majesty, do you want me to die alone on Zhenli planet? Do you want me to live and die on my own? My existence has affected your ancient Lotus Foundation, hasn't it? I'm a remnant of the Li dynasty, am I right? The Saint Emperor of Dali didn't respond to the eldest princess's questions. Sumo and Wu couldn't help but look at each other when they heard this. What was going on? Not only were Sumo and Wu confused, but even Li Beihan, who was standing to the side, was confused. After all, he didn't know much about the past. Ali, the Saint Emperor of Dali, let out a long sigh. If there's anything, we could talk about it back at Zhenli Palace. Huh? The eldest princess shook her head. Back then, I swore that I would never leave Zhenli Palace. But now that I've broken my oath, I won't go back. Ali, the Saint Emperor of Dali emphasized. Your Majesty. The eldest princess also emphasized. The Saint Emperor of Dali frowned and looked at the eldest princess. The hem of his imperial robe billowed like clouds. The eldest princess also looked at the Saint Emperor of Dali. Her eyes were as cold as water, calm and unperturbed. The surroundings were eerily quiet. Sumo, Wu and Li Beihan didn't know how to interrupt. Ali, you're destroying the ancient lotus. After a while, the Saint Emperor of Dali finally spoke slowly. Huh? The eldest princess chuckled. Your Majesty, if you think so, then I'm willing to suffer the punishment of 10,000 lotuses piercing my heart, and then never be reincarnated. The Saint Emperor of Dali didn't say anything. However, the hands behind his back were trembling slightly. Ali, you're forcing my real body to come out. Huh? The eldest princess shook her head and laughed dryly. Your Majesty, you're thinking too much. As long as your Majesty makes a move, Ali is willing to surrender. As she spoke, the eldest princess flipped her hand. The black lotus from before had already disappeared. Looking again, the black splendor on the eldest princess's body was gradually dissipating. Her black robe was gradually turning white. All the black was fading little by little. The black robe had turned into white clothes. Whoosh! The black veil on the eldest princess's face dissipated with the wind. A peerlessly beautiful face was revealed. The kind of beauty was very soul-stirring. In the coldness, there was endless nobility. There was a white lotus mark on each side of her forehead. As pure as a lotus, as beautiful as a lotus. At that moment, everything in the world was overshadowed. Wu couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Because the eldest princess was truly a peerless beauty. Li Beihan's expression also changed, because it was also the first time he saw the face of this great aunt. In the Dali realm, the eldest princess was a legendary existence, mysterious, and with a taboo. The Saint Emperor of Dali looked at the eldest princess and said with a smile, Ali, this is you, isn't it? Your Majesty, I'm no longer me. Please, Your Majesty, grant me 10,000 lotuses piercing my heart. Tears rolled down the eldest princess's eyes, but she smiled and said to the Saint Emperor of Dali. That was her true love. At that moment, although no one knew the inside story, their hearts all jerked violently. Chapter 9:10. Nothing was sadder than a dead heart. What the eldest princess of Dali dynasty had done was that she was a white lotus with a completely dead heart. She smiled with tears in her eyes, begging for death. That scene was unbearable to watch. The greatly divine emperor frowned, his body trembling. His eyes were filled with the same pain and complexity. 10,000 lotuses piercing the heart was the cruelest punishment of the great Li. It was the most ancient inheritance from the ancient Lotus Galaxy. In the entire Great Li dynasty, only the divine emperor could use it. At this time, the eldest princess was like a white lotus standing in the void. Her beauty was unparalleled. A gust of wind blew through the galaxy, messing up her long hair. Her white robe fluttered, and her beautiful eyes sparkled. She was smiling with tears in her eyes. At this moment, she was completely different from the demon-like eldest princess. Su Mo and Wu Er could not help but look at each other. They could not believe that the two eldest princesses, who were so different, were the same person. And what kind of past did the Divine Emperor have with the eldest princess? Ali, you are as beautiful as ever, the greatly Divine Emperor finally said with difficulty. Huh, so what? The eldest princess shook her head with a bitter smile. Back then, you chose the Great Li and gave up on me. My white lotus is just a facade. The black lotus has already taken root in my heart. You should know that once I become a lotus warrior, I'll be a true black lotus warrior, and there will be no end of trouble. If you don't kill me today, I will kill you in the future. The ancient lotus galaxy can only walk the path I choose. The eldest princess's words were calm and cold. Ali, listen to me. The greatly divine emperor said gently again. As long as you return to Zhenli Palace, then everything you said will not happen. No. The eldest princess shook her head decisively. I said, I've already broken my oath, so I will not go back. I do not want to be banished there, forgotten. Suppressionly Palace, to me, is a living coffin. Your Majesty will not understand that feeling. Actually, you have never truly understood me, have you? The eldest princess looked at the greatly divine emperor. If your Majesty acts, I will only ask for death. Ali, the greatly saint emperor's face turned pale. Why must it be like this? There is no other choice. Princess Royal's beautiful eyes were full of hope, but she smiled miserably. This is your only chance. Aren't you thinking about your ancient lotus? Then today, you should make a move against me. The Dali Saint Emperor said nothing, but the look in his eyes began to change. The eldest princess kept looking at the Dali Saint Emperor. Her eyes were calm, but there was a hint of stubbornness and gentleness in them. It was an extremely complicated look. At that moment, the golden light on the Dali Saint Emperor's body had become even brighter. Spiritual chi had already begun to surge around his body. Ripples of light rippled as a golden lotus appeared. Golden lotuses bloomed all around the Dali Saint Emperor. The golden lotuses shone brilliantly. At this moment, the entire starry sky was filled with golden light. The momentum of the 10,000 lotuses piercing the heart had begun to take shape. The black light on Sumo's magic boat dimmed slightly. The blood-red roses were all kept within 3 feet of the demonic boat. The Dali Saint Emperor's level is even higher than my master's. Wu said, Yes. Sumo nodded. But how could someone like this cause the Dali dynasty to descend into civil strife? Just a strand of his divine sense is enough to settle everything. Wu shook her head. She could not think of a reason. The golden light was intense, and his robe was as white as snow. The Dali Saint Emperor had already raised his hands, and thousands of golden lotuses rose and fell like the sea. The eldest princess looked at the Saint Emperor as if she were looking at a child she had once loved. There was an inexplicable smile on her lips, and there were still tears in the corners of her eyes that had yet to dry. Ali, I don't blame you for leaving the palace without permission. I don't blame you for killing the crown prince. I don't blame you for starting the war of the Dali dynasty and causing the deaths of the kings. But I only beg you to return to the palace. Is that not enough? The Dali Saint Emperor's voice was sorrowful. No, the eldest princess said decisively. Ha ha, you are indeed still that Ali. The Dali Saint Emperor was so angry that he laughed, and then he formed a seal with his hands. As he formed the seal, his will actually began to dissipate. Saint Emperor, no. Li Beihan couldn't help but kneel on the ground when he saw this. He shouted, The ancient Lotus Galaxy is still alive. However, the Dali Saint Emperor shook his head. He had already made up his mind. How could he be dissuaded? Far away, a beam of golden and white light suddenly shot up from the Sacred Emperor planet. That beam of light directly illuminated the entire Dali realm. At that moment, almost all of the citizens of the Dali dynasty saw that beam of light. All of the battleships in the universe also saw that beam of light. The light of the Saint Emperor. Everyone's eyes lit up. There had been rumors before that the Dali Saint Emperor had already fallen, and that was why the kings were in chaos. However, at that moment, everyone understood the Saint Emperor was still alive. Who wouldn't submit when the holy light appeared? On the sacred Emperor planet, in a cave, in a valley, a cultivator in white sat cross-legged. His temperament was like that of a lotus, incomparably holy, and there was a closed heavenly eye between his brows. He was none other than Li Shui. Not far from Li Shui, a female cultivator in green sat cross-legged. Her temperament was elegant and ethereal, and she was Li Ruo. Back then, during the demon-sealing war of the Three Realms, Li Shui was summoned back by the Saint Emperor, and Li Ruo followed him back to the Dali realm. Since then, she had been cultivating with Li Shui in the Dali realm, and was now a 9th stage venerable. This was a level that she would never be able to reach within the Three Realms. At that moment, Li Shui saw the Saint Emperor, and he couldn't help but frown. Then he let out a long sigh. "Father, you still can't let go of her. Actually, why do you have to do this? The Saint Emperor has suffered too much, and he also wants to be free," Li Ruo said. "But once his true body appears, he can no longer ascend. 3 million years of effort will go to waste. The path to rebirth in the ancient Lotus Galaxy might be severed from now on," Li Shui said. "Love is the hardest to repay." Li Ruo shook her head. "Father, I know I've let the eldest princess down. That's why it's like this. Don't we still have you in the ancient Lotus Galaxy? But I still want to save AMU," Li Shui said in a low voice. When Li Ruo heard this, she shook her head helplessly. "You want to save AMU, and the Saint Emperor doesn't want to disappoint you. But there is a way to achieve both in the myriad realms and not in vain. Sigh. Luckily, there's still sumo with AMU," Li Ruo said. Li Shui heard this and didn't say anything. In the galaxy, when the eldest princess saw the Saint Emperor's seal technique, her expression changed, because she really didn't want to force the Saint Emperor to come out of seclusion. She didn't want to force him. She was just forcing herself to let go of everything. But at that moment, the Saint Emperor chose to come out of seclusion. The eldest princess's body trembled slightly, and a knowing smile appeared on her face, even though it disappeared in a flash. Because it was all too late. All of this was just a consolation, or maybe it wasn't even consolation. Whoosh, whoosh, golden white light shone in the galaxy. The Saint Emperor's divine consciousness had completely disappeared, and the one standing in front of the eldest princess was the Dali dynasty's Saint Emperor, dressed in a golden white imperial robe. His eyes were filled with vicissitudes, and his hair was white. However, his body was a completely solid existence. Around him, golden white lotuses surged like the tide. At this moment, as long as he waved his hand, those lotuses would penetrate the eldest princess's immortal heart. "Brother, why do you have to do this?" the eldest princess slowly called out. Then, she couldn't control her tears. After 3 million years, she and he finally met again. Ali, the Dali dynasty's Saint Emperor's eyes were already filled with tears, but his hands were already raised. Thousands of lotuses were like knives and swords. "Brother." The eldest princess's face was full of tears. "Once, I only wanted to live a carefree life. Once, I only wanted to hold your hand. Once, I only wanted to wait for you. Once, every drop of my tears was for you. Once, I lived for you and I died for you. Once, I longed for the mountains and the tides. But after seeing it, I realized that the myriad realms are nothing more than this. I really hope that you and I can go back to when we first met. But there's no going back. I've already signed the strongest contract with the Black Lotus." Ali, the Dali dynasty's Saint Emperor, slowly closed his eyes, but he didn't know what to say. But then, he opened his hand slightly. Whoosh! In an instant, thousands of lotuses whistled toward the eldest princess. Thousands of lotuses pierced through the heart, parting forever. Apex. Chapter 911. The Dali galaxy was filled with thousands of lotuses. The Dali Divine Emperor's technique shocked Sumo and Wu Air. It was a peerless lotus technique. At that moment, the Dali Divine Emperor's golden and white light was like the sun. A huge golden-white lotus appeared beneath his feet. The Dali Divine Emperor was like a god. The power of a lotus knight was on full display. The eldest princess just stood there quietly and didn't move at all. She looked at the Dali Divine Emperor, her eyes full of tenderness. That man was the true love of her life. That man was also the demon that plagued her for life. When they met, they didn't know they were separated siblings. So, she fell in love with him and didn't regret it. But fate makes fools of people, and the heavens do not grant people their wishes. They were both members of the ancient royal family of the ancient lotus realm, and they all shouldered the mission of reproducing the ancient lotus. Because the ancient lotus galaxy was only a remnant of the ancient lotus realm. It was like the Milky Way and the Pure Land galaxy. The ancient lotus had been devoured by Yizong. She had once followed him to conquer the land and unify Gulian. She had been by his side in life and death. He ascended to the position of Saint Emperor, and she was conferred the title of Eldest Princess. In the entire ancient lotus galaxy, no one except the Divine Emperor could control her. She was below one and above all. The ancient lotus galaxy grew stronger day by day, but she wasn't happy. She didn't want to be the eldest princess of Dali. She only wanted to be his empress. She didn't want a peerless star palace. She only wanted his love. However, that was impossible. Even if she became a venerable, what could she do? She looked at him, marrying and having children. She looked at him, her hair white at the temples. So, she hated the ancient lotus. She hated her own bloodline. If she wasn't a member of the ancient lotus royal family, then everything was possible. This made her slowly fall into the demonic path. Black lotuses would appear in every withered and dead world. It was like a soul hiding in the dark, waiting to be possessed. Once it met a suitable host, it could be reborn. But when the Dali Divine Emperor discovered all this, it was already too late. The black lotus had already been planted and had even sprouted. He regretted it. He hated it, but there was nothing he could do. Thus, he made her swear a heavy oath that she would never leave the Lee Palace on planet suppression. It was the only remedy he could think of. She agreed, just for him. As long as he had a request, she would agree to anything. It was fine at first, but time could change almost everything. Everything could be crushed in time. What the eldest princess faced was boundless loneliness. That kind of loneliness only had a starting point and no end. In order to prevent the eldest princess Black Lotus Wolf from invading the other cultivators, all the cultivators of Lee Palace gradually retreated. In the end, there was not a single true cultivator left. There were only souls, puppets, and inanimate objects in Lee Jun Palace. They were not real cultivators, but in the end, they were all attacked by the Grand Princess Black Lotus Intent, and not a single one of them was spared. They were all controlled by the eldest princess. The Black Robe Cultivator and the Red Ghost Cultivator were both such existences. They belonged to the eldest princess and could be considered a part of her. Usually, the eldest princess used them as companions. Her desolation and loneliness were not something that could be understood by imagination. This was something that no one could understand. The Zhenli Star became a forbidden place in the Li dynasty. In fact, except for the core figures of the Li dynasty, other cultivators had gradually forgotten about the eldest princess. The consumption of time, the torture day and night, made the eldest princess more and more anxious, more and more immersed. Although she was already a great cultivator of the venerable realm, it did not mean that everything was perfect. There was no end to cultivation. She didn't even know when her white clothes had gradually turned black. An oath could bind her, and it could not bind her. In fact, everything was in the hands of the Holy Emperor, because only the Holy Emperor could suppress the eldest princess' demonic intent. However, the Holy Emperor was in death seclusion on the Holy Emperor planet. The eldest princess' wait was a kind of hopeless torture. She was like a person who fell into the sea, struggling to swim for 3 days and 3 nights, but the surroundings were still vast and endless. Perhaps, after swimming for another hour, she would see the shore. However, she could not wait any longer. For a whole 3 million years, the Holy Emperor of Li did not appear. So, the eldest princess endured to her limit. The Black Lotus will had completely eroded her, or rather, she had completely accepted the Black Lotus will. She had resentment and hatred. Therefore, she was about to become another herself. She had signed a most ancient contract with the god of the underworld. She could obtain power, but she wanted to lead the ancient Lotus Galaxy on the path of the god. Who was the god? She was actually at a loss, but there was that holy voice in her soul. Finally, she broke out of the palace. It was she who killed the crown prince of Dali. It was she who started the war of Dali. She wanted the world to be filled with blood and never have peace. Only then could she gradually calm down. However, she really did not want to hurt the Holy Emperor. She would never hurt him. But the Holy Emperor had come out of seclusion. 10,000 lotuses piercing her heart was actually a kind of release for her. She was willing to die at the hands of the Holy Emperor. In fact, the Holy Emperor of Dali knew everything. However, everything in the Dali dynasty had been built by Ali and him. As long as the Dali dynasty's heritage was not broken, she could do whatever she wanted. Therefore, the Holy Emperor would not come out of seclusion during the War of Philosophers, because he had more important things to do. He still believed that Ali would not destroy the entire ancient Lotus Galaxy. Apart from the Holy Lotus, he would rather the philosophers die. It could be said that in the entire ancient Lotus Galaxy, only the eldest princess could make the Holy Emperor come out of seclusion. Other people and matters did not matter to him. However, he had not expected such an outcome. The divine will and the Holy Emperor's medallion had been left behind to control the eldest princess. Li Shui could suppress other matters at the crucial moment, but not the eldest princess. However, the Holy Emperor had underestimated the eldest princess' obsession and the corrosion of the Black Lotuses. She did not want to turn back, because it was too tiring, too bitter. Whoosh, zizthi, 10,000 lotuses crisscrossed. In fact, everything happened in the blink of an eye. However, in that instant, the time in the Holy Emperor and the eldest princess sea of consciousness was stretched out infinitely. An instant was eternal. An instant was 10,000 years. The eldest princess slowly closed her eyes, her long eyelashes glistening with tears. Her beauty could stun all the worlds. But so what? She smiled, waiting for the 10,000 lotuses to pierce her heart. Brother, let us forget each other. The moment she closed her eyes, the Holy Emperor opened them. His expression was incomparably complicated. The woman in front of him was also his true love. She belonged to his heart, and he had been thinking about her for 3 million years. But he could only call her the eldest princess. Today, he was going to kill her. Actually, every trace of the Holy Emperor's weathered gaze was related to the eldest princess. If he could, he was willing to dye the eldest princess's black robe with his own hair. He was willing to let everything go back to when they first met. But he could not. The 10,000 lotuses rushed to 3 feet in front of the eldest princess. In an instant, she would perish. Whoosh! All the lotuses passed through the eldest princess's body like 10,000 shooting stars. At that moment, the Holy Emperor of Dali smiled with relief and sorrow. Because the eldest princess was safe, the Holy Emperor did not kill her. The eldest princess opened her eyes and looked at the Holy Emperor in disbelief. Brother, but the Holy Emperor did not look at her. Instead, he said calmly to Li Beihan, Beihan, hear my command. Beihan is here. Li Beihan hurriedly knelt down again. Quell the chaos. Leave none of the kings who participated in the battle alive. The Holy Emperor's voice was frighteningly calm. Because all the kings were his children, Li Beihan's expression changed slightly. He did not respond to the command immediately. They have all turned black, the Holy Emperor said calmly, and then his figure began to gradually dissipate. Brother? The eldest princess shouted. But the Holy Emperor did not say another word, nor did he look at her again. The only thing left in Li Beihan's hand was the glowing Holy Emperor's medallion. The eldest princess watched as the Holy Emperor gradually disappeared, and she immediately burst into tears. She knew that the Holy Emperor did not have the heart to kill her in the end. He could not bear to, but she had completely lost him. Her white robe began to gradually turn black again, and the eldest princess returned to her original appearance. Everything was like a dream. Peak. Chapter 9:12. The wind blew, and the rain fell. Inside the Dali realm, there was a sudden heavy rain. Heavy rain poured down from the sky. But how could there be rain in the universe? Actually, those were the tears of the eldest princess. Li Beihan held the Saint Emperor's token in his hand, and then he respectfully kowtowed to the eldest princess 3 times. No matter what, this woman was worthy of respect. Sumo and Wu Er looked at the eldest princess, who was kneeling in the void and crying, and their expressions were complicated. Sumo's cheeks were tense, and Wu Er's face was full of tears. Although she didn't know the past, as a woman, Wu Er understood the eldest princess's heart better. Men were often women's everything. When it comes to love, it goes deep. The eldest princess was a pitiful woman who was infatuated with love. Even if her tears turned into a downpour, what could she do? Sumo sighed, and then gently hugged Wu Er in her arms. Xiaolang, which one do you love more? Wu Er said softly. Sumo didn't understand. Mu Jinghong, Mu Hongchun, and Wu Er. Wu Er said softly. Which one do you love more? Oh. Sumo smiled. Why? Back then, I also looked like a demon. I was most afraid of you seeing me like that. If I also fell into the demonic path, what would you do? What wouldn't I do? Sumo looked at the eldest princess in the distance and said, Wasn't I also a demon? Now I'm still the demon king. If you become a demon, I will become a demon with you. You will always be you. How can you change? Yes. Wu Er leaned on Sumo's shoulder and nodded lightly. The Dali Saint Emperor probably thought so too. So he didn't kill the eldest princess, but chose to leave. Even if the eldest princess was corrupted, she is still the Ali in the Saint Emperor's heart. Perhaps. Sumo sighed deeply. At that moment, he remembered the words of the Ghost Lord. I would rather have a beauty than a kingdom. Actually, that was a greater sense of pride. After all, giving up a kingdom might be more difficult than obtaining it. But how many people in the infinite worlds could do that? Even the Ghost Lords who were unrestrained and unrestrained, didn't they die for the 3 realms in the end? Women were often just a part of man's world. Demon King, please head to the Saint Emperor planet. Li Beihan cupped his hands towards the Demon King. My father is waiting for you in his cave abode on the Saint Emperor planet. Sumo nodded silently. Li Beihan led the way. Sumo put away the pure child, and then her mind moved. He took Wu Er to control the magic boat and slowly flew past the first princess. At that moment, the eldest princess did not stop him. Her heart was empty. The heavy rain actually drenched her black robe. She was like a mortal woman, using her tears to mourn the past. However, tears could not change everything. On that day, not many people in the entire ancient Lotus realm could understand why the entire Dali realm would have such a sudden and seemingly endless rain. The interstellar space was empty. The eldest princess curled up her body like a cat that had been abandoned by its owner and was covered in cuts and bruises. She helplessly vented her emotions, completely unable to control herself. In the entire interstellar space, not a single person, not a single battleship. Everyone in the Dali realm did not dare to go near her, nor could they go near her. The heavy rain poured down like a waterfall from the sky, and then fell straight down, washing away everything. The eldest princess's cries were unbearable, making people feel endless hesitation. Sigh. And in that heavy rain, a person slowly walked over. In the heavy rain, that person's figure was a little hazy. However, it was vaguely visible that he wore a gray short shirt that was already in tatters and a pair of gray pants that were equally sloppy. On his feet, he wore a pair of straw sandals. He bowed and walked slowly, as if he could not walk in the wind and rain. However, his eye clearly passed through the dense curtain of rain and reached the eldest princess's ears. That long sigh seemed to have infinite magic power. The eldest princess gradually stopped sobbing and then slowly raised her head to look at the person who came. That person was a sloppy old beggar. It was a pity that Sumo was not here. Otherwise, he would be able to recognize that it was Lao Xuantu at a glance. "Who are you? How can you get so close to me?" The eldest princess looked at Lao Xuantu and sneered. "I'm crying. Why are you sighing with me? The person you love doesn't want you anymore? Silly child, come with me," Lao Xuantu said. "Go with you, haha." The eldest princess could not help but laugh coldly. "I don't even know who you are. Why should I go with you? Although the ancient lotus is big, there is no place for you." Lao Xuantu looked at the eldest princess with pity. "There is no place for me in the ancient lotus?" Ha ha! When the eldest princess heard this, she could not help but let out a strange laugh. "Old beggar, as long as I am willing, the entire ancient lotus can be mine. You dare to say that there is no place for me in the ancient lotus? What a joke! Ha ha! Let me tell you, my brother is the Li Saint Emperor. The entire ancient lotus galaxy is under his control. He loves me very much. If I want that star, he will give it to me. There is no place for me to go. Ah, ha ha ha. In all the realms, I'm afraid only I can save you." Lao Xuantu did not listen to what the eldest princess had to say and continued. Ha 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 ha. The eldest princess did not listen to what Lao Xuantu had to say. She stood up and waved her sleeves. As she waved her sleeves, the rain that filled the sky formed whirlpools. The eldest princess's graceful figure danced in the void. At that moment, the sky was like the sea, and the eldest princess was like a crazy soul drifting on the sea. Lao Xuantu looked at the eldest princess and did not say anything else. He shook his head and raised his arm. He stretched out his left hand and grabbed the eldest princess in the air. It was a slightly dirty hand, skinny and greasy, as if it had just grabbed a chicken leg and wiped its snot. The eldest princess's soul was in a mess, but her cultivation level and instincts were still there. Seeing that the old man was about to grab her, her face couldn't help but turn cold. At the same time, a black light flashed in her eyes. She waved her sleeves and reached out to grab Lao Xuantu. Lao Xuantu frowned, because he saw that the eldest princess's hand was already surrounded by a faint black aura. Even her hand was as black as ink. Vile creature! Lao Xuantu could not help but shout coldly. The black lotus had already covered the eldest princess's entire body. If he had not arrived in time, the eldest princess of the Li dynasty would have become a black lotus warrior. Whoosh! The eldest princess's hand was very fast. More importantly, Lao Xuantu did not dodge at all. Her hand directly grabbed Lao Xuantu's wrist. The black aura in her hand directly flowed into Lao Xuantu's arm. In the heavy rain, the black aura rose like a dragon. If it were an ordinary cultivator, they would have been blackened. However, Lao Xuantu stood in the rain, not moving at all. "Foolish child, come with me." A faint gray light emitted from Lao Xuantu's arm. Looking again, the black aura on the eldest princess's arm was directly dispersed. At the same time, the black light in the eldest princess's eyes shook, and her eyes gradually turned gray. Then, the eldest princess did not struggle at all. As if her soul had been taken away, she was directly led by Lao Xuantu toward the distant starry sky. Lao Xuantu walked forward slowly, holding the eldest princess's hand. Then he sang, "The Dali's misty, rain, ancient lotus tide. All hatred will not disappear until it arrives." Nothing else. The Dali's misty, rain, ancient lotus tide. So that's how it is. Ha ha ha. In the distance, the starry sky was one color. Lao Xuantu's figure disappeared into the wind and rain with the eldest princess. Chapter 9:13. The Holy Emperor Planet. The Holy Emperor Planet was the center of the entire Dali realm, or even the entire ancient Lotus Galaxy. Of the 13 planets of Dali, it was the most dazzling one. The Holy Emperor Planet was to the ancient Lotus Galaxy what the Kuan Butterfly Secret Realm was to the Kuan Butterfly Galaxy. It was the birthplace of the entire ancient Lotus Galaxy, the root of the galaxy. Usually, without the Holy Emperor, and the Holy Lotus orders, no one was allowed to enter the Holy Emperor planet. Violators would be executed. The reign of the entire Dali realm had yet to stop. No one knew how long it would last. The Holy Emperor's figure appeared on the Holy Emperor planet, but his face was pale and he looked even older. The 10,000 lotuses piercing the heart was a top-level lotus spell. At the last moment, the Holy Emperor had forcefully dispelled the spell. As such, he had suffered the backlash of the lotus spell. More importantly, he shouldn't have come out of seclusion. The Holy Emperor had cultivated for 3 million years, and his seclusion was one of life and death. If he was perfect, he would live. If not, he would die. Today, he couldn't force his way out. Although he wouldn't die right away because of his powerful cultivation, there was no turning back. The Dali Saint Emperor landed in a valley. This valley was where Li Shui and Li Ruo cultivated. It was called the Dreary Valley. This was where the spirit chi of the entire ancient Lotus Galaxy gathered. Cultivating here would yield twice the result with half the effort. Before, the Holy Emperor had also cultivated here. However, his cave was in the deepest part of the Dreary Valley. However, the Dali Saint Emperor stopped at the entrance of the valley closest to him, because he couldn't go on. Cough, cough. Cough, cough. The Holy Emperor started coughing violently. Golden blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. His body was hunched like an ordinary old man. He held onto an ancient tree with one hand, panting slightly. His face began to age rapidly, and his gray hair instantly turned white. He was no longer the Holy Emperor who looked old but brimming with draconic might. Father. At this time, Li Shui and Li Ruo had already appeared in front of him. Li Shui supported the Holy Emperor, and at the same time, a wave of lotus chi passed over. But at that moment, Sumo felt that the Holy Emperor's Dan Ocean was bottomless, like a bottomless black hole. Lear, it's useless. The great Li Saint Emperor waved his hand. I'm already at the end of my rope. Imperial Father. Li Shui's expression was grave. Lear, even though I've already advanced to the 3rd stage of the Lotus Warrior realm, I still can't revive the ancient lotus. Today, everything he had done was for naught. Cough, cough. The Dali Saint Emperor coughed up a few more mouthfuls of golden blood. Don't blame me for this, the great Li Saint Emperor said sadly. This child does not dare. Li Shui said. Yes, the great Li Saint Emperor nodded. Today, I can still come back, and at the same time, hang on to my last breath. Although I can't advance anymore, I still have the strength to fight. I'll save this battle for when I'm needed the most. After 2 hours, I will fall into a state of lotus sleep. Lotus sleep? Li Shui was taken aback. This was because lotus sleep was a state of suspended animation for lotus cultivators, and they could only wake up once. After awakening, he would have the power of a subversive level for a while, but then he would be completely destroyed. This was also the choice many Lotus warriors made before they died. They chose to use their last bit of power to protect their inheritors. Under normal circumstances, a Lotus warrior's lifespan could reach tens of thousands of years, but Lotus warriors could not reincarnate. Therefore, the death of a Lotus warrior meant eternal death, and they could not come back. Imperial Father. Li Shui wanted to stop the Saint Emperor's choice. However, the great Li Saint Emperor waved his hand and said sadly, Lear, I have no other choice. This is the only way my existence can have a final meaning. Today, I will pass the throne of Great Li to you. The great Li Saint Emperor said, one day, you can awaken the sleeping power of the ancient Lotus Galaxy. This, Li Shui was slightly taken aback. This was because he had never wanted to be the great Li Saint Emperor, or rather, in his heart, he refused to be the great Li Saint Emperor. He had once vowed to only protect Great Li and protect the ancient Lotus. There's no one else. The great Li Saint Emperor smiled bitterly. I have already ordered Beihan to quell the rebellion, and all the princes will be executed. You are the only heir to the throne. Imperial Father. Li Shui frowned. Do they really deserve to be killed? Huh. The great Li Saint Emperor laughed coldly. Li, you should know that the princes who rebelled are not of my bloodline. I just don't want the scandal of Great Li to spread to the world. Kill. The Great Li Saint Emperor's tone was resolute, and then he looked at Li Shui and said slowly, Li Er, I know your ambition is not the throne. However, now that you're a Lotus warrior in the second stage, there is hope for you to revive the ancient Lotus. If you don't want to be the Saint Emperor, then pass it on to Bayon. He will definitely be a qualified Saint Emperor. I will obey Imperial Father's orders. Li Shui heard this and did not say anything else, because at this time, he had no other choice. Everything of the ancient Lotus could only be placed on him. The Great Li Saint Emperor nodded in relief and then pointed with one hand. A golden lotus appeared at the tip of his finger. It was the mark of the Great Li Saint Emperor. It landed directly between Li Shui's brows and then hid in his third eye. Li Er, you are the Saint Emperor. The Great Li Saint Emperor smiled in relief and then looked at Li Ruo. Li Er is fortunate to have you. Imperial Father. Li Ruo was about to cry. The Great Li Saint Emperor straightened his body and then patted Li Shui's shoulder. I have cultivated for tens of millions of years and have fought countless battles. Unfortunately, the Great Li Saint Emperor paused. Unfortunately, I cannot love those I love, and most of those I'm close to are not close. Fortunately, the ancient Lotus still exists, and I have not let down the ancient Lotus royal family. And you are my last dignity. The Great Li Saint Emperor let out a long sigh, but it was not enough to sigh his entire life. Imperial Father. Li Shui could understand everything the Saint Emperor said, but he really did not know what to say. The Great Li Saint Emperor did not speak again and walked slowly towards the depths of dreamy Leaving Valley. He walked very slowly, like an old man with one foot in the grave. Li Shui and Li Ruo could not see him off. This was the law of the sleeping lotus. The Saint Emperor had to walk towards the sleeping cave and then have a chance to awaken himself. Li Shui and Li Ruo looked at the Saint Emperor's aged figure, and then they both knelt. Farewell, Imperial Father. Li Shui's voice was trembling, because that was the farewell of a living person, born between heaven and earth, like a white steed passing through a crevice, suddenly gone. Life is easy to grow old. The lotus blooms and falls, like the stars and the moon, polished and polished. I ask you, can you remember the love of the past? I ask you, how many nights did you sing in your dreams? I miss you, you miss me, I miss you, thousands of thoughts, but who can I tell? I let you down, you let me down, life and death are intertwined, a lifetime wasted. The Saint Emperor's footsteps were a bit unsteady, and his song was full of loneliness and melancholy. Li Er, if one day your aunt returns, unless she wants to uproot the ancient lotus, otherwise you don't kill her. The Great Li Saint Emperor's last words came. I understand. Li Shui kowtowed, tears finally rolling down his face. The Great Li Saint Emperor's figure disappeared at the end of the valley. Chapter 9:14. Actually, I quite like the last few chapters. They make me feel a little like when I wrote the 9 coffins. I feel that my work still has a soul. I'm willing to laugh and cry in their stories. I'm willing to write their lives for them. Thank you to those who have given me inspiration. Thank you for reading. I will persevere. I hope that I will not forget my original intention. I will dedicate this book to all of you. Reality is too cruel. True meaning can be found in books. Sometimes I also want to have a lotus sleep. One day, I can awaken by myself. Then, in a battle of the pinnacle, I will fall and leave behind a legend. Actually, I especially like the song about the Great Li Divine Emperor that I wrote yesterday. Life is a waste, and I'm filled with emotions after the college entrance examination. I will make up for it. I owe 4 chapters, but I won't forget. Hidden Samsara has no updates today. Currently typing. Please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 9:15. The rain continued to fall without stopping. 2 women in red stood at the edge of the Dali realm. Their red clothes and red skirts made them look like 2 red clouds. Their appearances were exactly the same. However, their eyes were slightly different. One of them had eyes that were deep and bottomless, as if they were filled with magic. The other's eyes were as clear as water. They were none other than Wang Yu and Shen Ming. Amu had broken the karma, and they were reborn as twin sisters. Now, they were at the peak of the rebirth realm. They had come to the ancient Lotus Galaxy according to their original agreement. In fact, they had already been standing here before the rain. They had seen everything that had happened. The torrential rain bounced back when it was 30 feet away from them. Countless fireworks seemed to explode around them. The rain filled the sky, and the singing entered their ears. From afar, everything seemed to have a different feel to it. The Dali Divine Emperor's singing had always been filled with loneliness and desolation. At this moment, the singing spread in the rain, adding to the helplessness and desolation. Sister, is that the Dali Divine Emperor's singing? Shunming tilted his head and asked. Yes. Wang Yu nodded, then looked at the rain and said self-deprecatingly, all of this is really a joke of fate. It seems that those who fall in love with their brother do not have a good ending. Sister, don't talk nonsense. Shinming looked at Wang Yu and couldn't help but twitch his mouth. However, I didn't see how the Great Li Dynasty's grand princess disappeared. Did you see it clearly? I didn't either. Wang Yu shook his head. Just now, I fully activated my ghost eyes, but I didn't see how the imperial princess disappeared. But I hope that poor woman will have a good ending. Yes. Shinming nodded. Sister, are we still going to the Sacred Emperor planet? I don't think we need to go. The Dali Divine Emperor has already given the order to quell the chaos. There will probably be some unrest in the Dali realm. We don't need to get involved in this mess. Besides, our cultivation levels might not be able to help. The Sacred Lotus doesn't need us. Didn't the Demon King go to the Saint Emperor planet? If something really happens, he will help. Yes. Okay, then let's go straight to the Glaze world. Shunming nodded his head, then frowned and said, but the Glaze realm is so vast, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Wang Yu laughed helplessly. In any case, it's still better than looking for a needle in the entire Izong world. If my brother is in the color glass world, then Shunyin must be there as well. We will definitely find them. Sister, you should call her sister-in-law. Shinming said frankly. I won't. Wang Yu snorted coldly. When you see brother-in-law, he will definitely let you call him that. Shinming laughed. Oof. Wang Yu raised his eyebrows. Then we'll talk after we meet him. He has probably forgotten about me, his younger sister. What sister-in-law? My sister is very good. Shinming said again. Better than me? Wang Yu looked at Shinming and pretended to be unhappy. Both of you are good. Shinming said with a grin. That's more like it. Wang Yu nodded. Little girl, don't forget, I was the one who accompanied you during the Galaxy era. Your sister and my brother are the same. They are both heartless people. They didn't even visit us after leaving the Galaxy era, causing us to have to reincarnate to leave the village to find them. Otherwise, we would have been so comfortable in the village. Sigh. Shinming pouted. Sister, what you said makes sense. We have a bitter life. Wang Yu smiled, and then took Shinming's hand. Bitter life, so be it. It's our fault for thinking about them. Let's go. Yes. Shinming nodded obediently. The two sisters turned around and took a step in the heavy rain, then disappeared in an instant. Delete Galaxy. Sumo and Wu Air followed Li Beihan and were naturally unobstructed. With the appearance of the Sage Emperor, the situation of the Dali dynasty was very clear. After Li Beihan brought back Sumo and Wu Air, he would quell the chaos. At this moment, they had already arrived at the void outside the Sage Emperor. Li Beihan's fleet was stationed outside the void. The entire fleet stretched for thousands of miles. It was the strongest fleet in the ancient Lotus Galaxy, excluding its dormant forces. Moreover, they only listened to Li Beihan's orders. They were the absolute elites. Li Beihan did not return to his own camp. Instead, he led Sumo and Wu Air straight to Mengli Valley. At this moment, Li Shui and Li Ruo were already waiting outside Mengli Valley. The demonic ship was put away. Sumo and the others landed at the entrance of Mengli Valley. Sumo and Li Shui cupped their hands and smiled at each other. Long time no see, Demon King. Long time no see, Saint Lotus. In the past, they were enemies. But now, in the Yizong world, they were friends, not enemies. Li Ruo, Wu Er, and the others also met one after another. In fact, they were all old acquaintances. In the three realms, they had met many times. Today, they were all quite emotional. The universe spun and the world changed. Everything that had happened earlier was like a dream. The 9th level of the Venerable Realm. Li Ruo's cultivation surprised Sumo and Wu Er. One should know that Li Ruo's cultivation was very ordinary before. It seemed that after returning to the Yizong world, Li Shui and Wu Er's cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. Li Shui invited Sumo and Wu Er into Mengli Valley. In fact, there was a great hall in the valley called Dali Palace. However, the sacred emperor and the sacred lotus rarely cultivated in the Greatly Palace. Dali Palace was the center of power of the entire Dali dynasty. All the officials of the Dali dynasty cultivated in Dali Palace. However, Li Shui had been ordered by the sage emperor to stay out of the civil strife this time. Therefore, the two sides were so unbridled. Li Shui did not bring Sumo and Wu Er to Dali Palace, but directly brought them to the cave that he and Li Ruo cultivated in. The cave was very spacious, not smaller than the palace. Inside the cave, the host and guests sat down. At this time, Li Beihan found that Li Shui was different. The will of the sage emperor? Li Beihan looked at Li Shui because he felt the presence of the sage emperor on his father. That was a wondrous inheritance. Father King, Li Beihan looked dazedly at Li Shui. The sage emperor forcefully left seclusion and used the heaven-shocking lotus art. At the last moment, he reversed the lotus art, so he was heavily injured by the backlash. Therefore, he has already chosen to sleep with the lotus. Li Shui said, "Sleep with the lotus?" Li Beihan heard and couldn't help but frown. Of course, he understood what sleep with the lotus meant. The difference between sleeping with the lotus and dying was that he still had one chance to act. The oil lamp has run out. There is no other choice. Li Shui sighed. Therefore, the sage emperor passed the Saint Lotus mark to me. Right now, I am a new sage emperor of Dali. Li Shui really did not want to be the sage emperor, but there was no other way. At this time, his third eye opened slightly. Inside, there are thousands of golden lights, a golden lotus. Beihan kowtows to the sage emperor. Seeing this, Li Beihan hurriedly knelt on one knee and handed over the sage emperor's medallion with both hands. Paying respects was a necessary etiquette. The sage emperor's medallion was like a jade seal in the mortal world. Rise. Li Shui took the medallion and waved his hand. Han, since I have already inherited the throne, then you are the heir of Dali in the future. Therefore, you must cultivate well. In the future, the position of sage emperor is yours. As your father, I do not want to be the sage emperor. This child will listen to your teachings. Li Beihan said. Of course, he knew his father's thoughts, but his current cultivation level was not enough to suppress all the power of the ancient lotus realm. Li Shui gave the medallion to Li Beihan. Take the medallion and go to the Li Palace to dispatch the left and right hall marshals. Have them bring their cultivation army with you and quickly quell the rebellion. Leave none of the princes alive. And I have more important things to do here. Yes, sir. Li Beihan took the medallion without another word, then bowed to Sumo and Wu Er and disappeared. Only then did Li Shui look at Sumo and laugh bitterly. The unrest of the country. Please excuse us, Demon King. You are here because of AMU, right? Chapter 9:16. That's right. Sumo laughed. AI. Li Water sighed. I'm ashamed to say this. Actually, I know of the galaxy shattering, but I was powerless. Holy Lotus, who swallowed the galaxy world? Sumo asked, raising an eyebrow. Purifier. Li Water said, the worlds are born from lotuses, one world, one lotus. When a lotus scholar reaches stage 3, they can plant lotuses and then use the lotuses as roots to cultivate again. Sumo nodded. In fact, he already knew this. The worlds can constantly evolve, but it is an extremely long process. So long that many lotus scholars cannot see the end. Demon King, you have lived in the 3 realms for so many years. You should know better than me. Samsara after samsara. It seems endless. Sumo said. Even so, you only reached the peak of the venerable realm. In fact, each reincarnation is the growth of a world lotus. Lee Waters said, it is not a simple repetition. However, besides the lotus cultivator and the lotus soul, no one can see the entire process. Because it is too long. It is so long that many lotus scholars are not willing to wait. Lee Water mentioned long for the second time. It could be seen that it really was endless time. So within the worlds, there are so-called purifiers. They are not willing to wait. There are worlds outside of one treasury. Sumo asked with a frown. The worlds are endless. There is no end. Lee Water nodded. What we see, what we know, is forever a drop in the ocean. Compared to the 3 realms, one treasury may be extremely vast. However, in the vast ocean is only a relatively high-level lotus. No one can say for sure how many lotuses, how many worlds there are in the vast universe. Windwheel Lotus World? Sumo thought of the white-robed Guardian King's words. Windwheel Lotus World? Lee Water was startled. You've heard of this before? I've seen the remnant soul of the white-robed Guardian King of the 3 realms. He said, each Windwheel Lotus World is made up of a wind wheel, a perfume sea, and many world lotuses. The Windwheel Lotus Realm is a form of the world above the Great World and the Realm of Truth. Sumo said, however, he didn't say anything else. And what kind of world is the True Law Realm? Li Shui shook his head with a smile. One stash is a large world. If it evolves again, it will become a True Law Realm. However, the gate of truth wouldn't easily open. Its natural growth might require an endless amount of time. Therefore, Izong World needs to devour more realm lotuses to speed up its evolution. Thus, Izong swallowed the galaxy, Sumo said. Not just the galaxy, Li Shui sighed. I also know of the ancient lotus world and the Kuan butterfly world. Kuan butterfly, Sumo and Wu Er were both stunned. They had already guessed the world of ancient lotus. However, the Kuan butterfly world was the same. Li Shui nodded. The present ancient lotus and Kuan butterfly galaxy are remnants of the former world. However, our lotus souls have already been completely destroyed. Sumo and Wu Er looked at each other, as if saying, no wonder the Kuan butterfly race would treat them like this. From a certain perspective, they were also cultivators of the world of death. The composition of Izong world is extremely complex, Li Shui said, because for tens of thousands of years, it has continuously swallowed and expanded. Maybe it isn't far from ascending to the True Law Realm. At least, it is continuously getting closer. Then who is the lotus soul of Izong? Sumo asked. Li Shui shook his head and said, I don't know. However, that person is definitely a peerless hero. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to push the wheel of Izong forward. He maintains a delicate balance in Izong world. Just this point, he is a peerless expert. The ancient lotus and Kuan butterfly both have lotus warriors. However, none of us dare to cross the line, otherwise, Li Shui paused. Otherwise, the ancient lotus and Kuan butterfly will be erased from Izong world. Hearing this, Sumo couldn't help but frown, thinking, is this Li Shui's shackles? Even having a lotus warrior won't do? Sumo said, no. Li Shui shook his head. Izong's lotus soul should be in existence infinitely close to Fa Lotus Venerable. Legend has it, cultivators below the 3rd stage of Lotus Warrior Realm, he can destroy them with a wave of his hand. As long as it's in Izong world, even a peak Lotus Warrior cannot contend against him, because he can mobilize the origin power of the entire Izong world. In theory, as long as the power is in Izong world, it could be controlled by him. That includes the origin of the ancient lotus, the origin of the power of the Kuan butterfly, and even the origin of your pure land. This is also the main reason why existences like us can still live in Izong world. Before we reach the limit of Izong's lotus soul, we won't be completely annihilated. What is the limit of Izong's lotus soul? The ancient lotus galaxy and Kuan butterfly galaxy don't have lotus souls anymore, so lotus warriors can't leave their own galaxy. And for the current you, I'm afraid you can't become a lotus warrior. Li Shui sighed. So it was like that. Li Shui couldn't go find AMU. Why can't I become a lotus warrior? Sumo asked. Because the lotus soul can stop him from absorbing the power of this world. Li Shui said. In other words, once you become a lotus warrior, then the pure soul galaxy might break away from his control. This is a situation that Izong's lotus soul definitely doesn't want to see, because that will weaken Izong world's power to break into the true law realm. Then what's the point of evolving into the true law realm? Lotus souls can directly reach the great lotus heavenly venerable realm. Li Shui said. Then what about living beings? Sumo frowned and asked. Living beings? Li Shui couldn't help but smile helplessly. Demon King, not every lotus soul has living beings in its eyes. Maybe back then, whether you and AMU chose reincarnation or eternal life, you considered living beings. But Izong's lotus soul is definitely not like that. He only wants to become great lotus heavenly venerable. Living beings are just puppets and dogs in his eyes. Sumo nodded silently. Actually, he also couldn't tell how many living beings he considered when he chose reincarnation, because back then, he thought that as long as he existed, living beings existed. He could make living beings reappear. Holy Lotus, how many realms are there above the Lotus Warrior? Wu asked. The Lotus Warrior is divided into 9 realms. Above the Lotus Warrior is the Dharma Lotus King Venerable, and above the Dharma Lotus King Venerable is Great Lotus Heavenly Venerable. King Venerable and Heavenly Venerable don't have small realms, but there must be realms above Great Lotus Heavenly Venerable. But I don't know what it is. I also don't know what the end is. Maybe there is no end to cultivation. Li Shui's eyes were a little lost. The more he knew, the more he didn't know. Sumo and Wu were slowly understanding Li Shui's confusion. Boom! Crack! And at this moment, an extremely powerful spiritual energy wave came from the galaxy. That was the power of a venerable self-destruction. Its shockwaves scattered onto the sacred royal planet, turning into countless meteors. The second prince has fallen, Li Shui said calmly. How pitiful. They're also like father's puppets. Even when they die, they might not know why they are alive. Chapter 9:17. Time flew, and 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. The aroma of wine permeated the air in Mangli Valley. Sumo and Li Shui drank and chatted to their heart's content. Wu and Li Ruo accompanied them by their sides. Actually, they were all cultivators from the realm of death and knew each other in the 3 realms, so they naturally had a lot to talk about. At the same time, the war in the Li dynasty was far more intense and swift than Sumo had imagined. It was only 3 days, but it was like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. On the first day, the second prince died. On the second day, the fourth prince perished as well. On the third day, the other princes were killed one after another. The entire war only took 3 days. It was as fast as lightning. During the war, Li Shui did not leave the Saint Emperor planet. Even his consciousness and clones did not leave. Li Ruo was also present. However, the civil war in the Li dynasty was quelled just like that. Li Shui and Li Ruo did not care about the war at all. Suemo was quite shocked by this, because according to Shun Lang's information, the second and fourth princes were both at the 7th stage Venerable Realm. The other princes were also at the Venerable Realm. Their combat abilities were extraordinary. One should know that Li Beihan was only at the peak of the Rebirth Realm. Even if he had some tricks up his sleeves, How could he kill a 7th-stage venerable realm cultivator? Of course, it was also possible that the Marshal of the Lee Palace was an advanced venerable realm cultivator. At the same time, the fall of the princes was definitely a loss for the ancient Lotus realm, because cultivators of the Exalt realm weren't easy to find. Sumo believed that in the entire ancient Lotus galaxy, even if the powers in slumber woke up, there would not be many venerable realm cultivators. However, Li Beihan really followed the Elysian Emperor's orders and killed all the princes. Sumo did not understand the Elysian Emperor's actions. Why did he have to kill the princes? Sheng Lian, why did the old Elysian Emperor insist on killing the princes? Sumo could not help but ask. Huh? Li Shui laughed bitterly. First, they might really have been corrupted, because the entire internal strife was instigated by the eldest princess. If they were corrupted, it would take some time before they were discovered. Killing them is the safest way. Secondly, the Sage Emperor actually hoped that they would kill each other and then perish on their own. However, when the Saint Emperor's true body appeared, they definitely wouldn't kill each other again. Therefore, we can only quell the chaos. Oh, hearing this, Sumo felt quite confused and said, "Are you saying that the Saint Emperor wants them all to die?" Yes. Li Shui nodded. That's because Izong's Lotus Soul definitely doesn't want too many venerables to appear in the ancient Lotus Star field. Their deaths could be exchanged for a sliver of safety. Of course, there's another important reason. Li Shui's tone paused slightly. Then he raised his wine cup, inviting Sumo to drink. Oh! Sumo paused for a moment, then raised her glass as well. At this time, Li Shui finally said solemnly, "Because they are not of my royal father's bloodline at all. Among all the princes, only the eldest prince and I are his biological sons. He, Demon King, do you understand now?" With that, Li Shui drank all the wine in the cup. He seemed to be drinking that cup of wine on behalf of the Sage Emperor. Raising his glass, Sumo was stunned. He had never thought of this. Then, he thought of the Sage Emperor's song and couldn't help but sigh. The Sage Emperor couldn't have the one he loved. So many of his children weren't his biological son. That was simply a kind of sorrow. What had the Sage Emperor experienced in his life? Sumo didn't say anything else and drank all the wine in the cup with Li Shui. Wine was sometimes a bitter soup to forget the world. The situation in the ancient Lotus Star field quickly stabilized. 7 days later, Su Mo participated in Li Shui's coronation ceremony as the Sage Emperor. In the ancient Lotus Star field, many small worlds came to congratulate him. The new Sage Emperor had succeeded the throne, and the old Sage Emperor had fallen asleep. This wasn't the first time for the ancient Lotus realm. Even though there was the chaos in the Great Li dynasty, it didn't affect them much. After all, Li Shui was a Lotus Knight. His status and cultivation were enough to control everything. Now, the ancient Lotus Star field was firmly under Li Shui's control, and the biggest threat to him was Izong's Lotus Soul. However, no one could tell when that kind of danger would truly appear. However, it was like a sword hanging above his head, ready to fall at any time. Another 7 days passed. Sumo and Wu said their goodbyes. They were going to Glaze Realm. You can't leave the water. It was not only because he was bound by the soul of the Lotus of Izong, but also because he was now the Saint Emperor of Dali. The entire ancient Lotus Starfield was now on his shoulders. The ancient Lotus Galaxy was a remnant of the ancient Lotus Realm. It didn't have a Lotus Soul, but once a cultivator reached Lotus Realm Stage 3 or above, there was a possibility that it could be revived. This was because the Saint Emperor's mark, which had been passed down through the generations, contained an ancient Lotus seed. That was the biggest secret of the ancient Lotus Star Zone. With that Lotus seed, they might be able to regenerate Lotus Souls. Once the ancient Lotus Soul was reborn, they would be able to break free from the restraints of the hidden Lotus Soul. However, the regenerative Lotus Soul required one to be at least a Lotus Knight Stage 3. They needed to use their own lotuses to breed lotus seeds, and then after tens of thousands of years, they would fuse into one. Only then would he be able to regenerate a Lotus Soul. Originally, the Saint Emperor of Dali could already be a Lotus Realm Stage 3 and had even started cultivating lotuses. Once he succeeded, Li Shui could leave the ancient Lotus Realm and go to the Glaze Realm. However, the Saint Emperor's real body came out of seclusion, and all his efforts were in vain. Therefore, this mission could only be given to Li Shui. This was a special inheritance of the ancient Lotus royalty. In fact, this inheritance had been passed down through many generations. It could be said that it was the highest mission of the ancient Lotus royalty. Li Shui didn't tell Sumo about this in detail. However, Sumo understood that Li Shui couldn't leave the ancient Lotus galaxy. Demon King, Sacred Emperor Planet's Void Li Shui said to Su and Mo, "The Glaze Realm is the most mysterious world within the First Treasury. Chun Luo and Hanya can't be compared to it. Therefore, you must be careful on this trip. You are already at the peak of the Venerable Realm, and becoming a Lotus Knight is just around the corner. Therefore, the hidden Lotus Soul will definitely not let you continue to grow stronger." The swordsmen in the Kuan Butterfly Galaxy that day were most likely people with the hidden Lotus Soul. "Don't worry, Sheng Lian. I will be careful," Sumo said. Li Shui stretched out his hand and took out a lotus flower from his bosom. However, that lotus flower was not a real lotus flower, but a 5-colored lotus flower. Unfortunately, Sumo couldn't see through its origins. At this moment, Li Beihan's eyes flashed with shock. "Demon King, with my friendship with AMU, it was my duty to save him." But Li Shui sighed. "We are both cultivators of the realm of the dead, you should understand. So, I have let AMU down. Sheng Lian, don't blame yourself." Sumo comforted. Sigh. Li Shui shook his head and didn't explain further. "This lotus is called the 5-colored lotus. You can nurture it in your Dan's Sea, and at a critical moment, you can borrow the power source of the ancient Lotus realm. It can instantly give you the power of a Stage 5 Lotus Knight, but it can only last for 6 hours. And after you use it, the 5-colored lotus will disappear. Now, there are only 2 5-colored lotuses in the entire ancient Lotus galaxy. I will give this one to you. I hope you can save AMU. This counts as me doing my part." Li Shui said. "Thank you, Sheng Lian." Sumo didn't refuse and took the 5-colored lotus, because he understood that this was more of Li Shui's friendship with AMU. "Sheng Lian, if I can save AMU, we will restore the galaxy, and then I will help you to grow another ancient lotus." Sumo said. Me too. Li Shui nodded solemnly. No one said anything else. After all, they had said everything they needed to say. Sumo and Wu Er cupped their hands and bid farewell to Li Shui, Li Ruo, and Li Beihan. Then, the demonic arc appeared under their feet. The demonic arc jumped and instantly disappeared. Chapter 918. Color glaze was one of the 7 treasures of Buddhism. It was said that the 7 Buddhas of the Glaze realm had descended upon the world to deliver all living beings from suffering. Afterwards, they all transformed into glaze bodies and guarded this realm. Hence, it was named the Glaze realm. Chenluo, Sanskrit, Valurium, and Swaying, the 4 mid-level worlds of Izong, were all different. The colored glass world and the Saha world were even more unfamiliar to the dust world. At this time, Sumo and Wu Er were already standing at the edge of the glass world. There was a door between the glazed world and Chun Luo's ancient Lotus Star Zone. Thus, Sumo and Wu Er left the Sacred Emperor planet and headed straight for the Lazuli world. Even though they were using all their strength to activate the demonic ship, it still took them more than 2 months to travel through the vast universe. Of course, Sumo didn't jump between the stars. Finally, they arrived at the southern edge of the Dustnet world. That was a place that even Han Bingi, who had once roamed around, had never reached. That time, she was almost there. However, for the sake of Miao Longer, she hurried back to the northern Chill City. Otherwise, she might have entered the Lazuli world alone. However, Han Bingi did not know that AMU was sealed in the Lazuli world. There was naturally an extremely powerful interstellar barrier between Chunluo and Lioli. It was an interstellar desert that was nearly 10 million kilometers wide. It was similar to the star desert sea between the Chilan star region and the Peacock star region in the Hanya world. However, this interstellar desert was probably a few times bigger than the star desert ocean. Moreover, it should be filled with many space-time cracks. On the sacred emperor planet, Li Shuai had given Sumo a star chart for reference. There seemed to be a few special worlds in this interstellar desert. However, Li Shuai could not guarantee the accuracy of that star map. Therefore, this barren barrier was also a test for Sumo and Wu Er. Originally, Xing Fei, Han Bingyi, and the others had gone to the Glaze world first. However, there was no news from them. This made Sumo a little worried. After all, besides Xing Fei, the others weren't at the Exalt realm. Did something happen to them? Sumo and Wu Er stood on the demonic arc. They looked at the vast starry sky in front of them, and their expressions were calm. This was because if they didn't even have the confidence to cross the interstellar barrier, they wouldn't be able to save AMU. The interstellar barrier was right in front of them. At this moment, from the perspective of Sumo and Wu Er, it was an empty existence. It was completely black like a huge black hole, but the edge of the hole could not be seen. There seemed to be no light in it at all. With a single thought from Sumo, the demonic boat expanded to a radius of 1,000 feet. The entire demonic arc looked like a huge black battleship. However, there were only 2 people on the warship. At this time, Wu Er patted her storage bag and released the little white pig. Humph! As soon as that guy came out, he started to play around like a bird that had just been released from its cage. However, when it saw everything around it, it was a little confused. Haha! The little white pig stared blankly at Sumo and Wu Er. How did the demonic boat become so big? Was it going to evolve again? Oomph. We're going to the Lazuli world. Now, we're going to cross the interstellar barrier. Your spiritual sense is extremely sharp, so I let you out. You have to be careful, Wu Er said with a smile. Humph. When the little white pig heard that, it could not help but pout. It thought that something fun was going to happen. It turned out that it was in charge of being on guard. Both of you are already at the venerable realm. Do you still need me to be on guard? The little fellow criticized in its heart. However, when Sumo took out a celestial fruit from her pocket, the little white pig's pout instantly disappeared, and then it changed into a happy and flattering expression. Glutton! Sumo scolded with a smile, and then her hand shook. That celestial fruit fell directly into the little white pig's mouth. Sumo's celestial fruits all came from the soul storage altar. Any one of them was priceless. However, the little white pig ate the celestial fruit as if it was eating fruits. In the infinite realms, there were probably not many divine beasts that could compare to this treatment. It was enjoying it with relish, and it smacked its lips. Because there was only one, the little fellow ate it very seriously. In the end, it even licked the residue at the corner of its mouth clean. If this was in the soul storage altar, it would definitely not have done that. This time, it ate the core of the fruit. Be careful. There will be more later, Sumo said. Umph! When the little white pig heard that, its eyes instantly widened, and it nodded vigorously. Then, its expression became serious, and, at the same time, it flapped its pair of wings. Whoosh! Its figure instantly turned into the appearance of an adult dragon elephant soul eater. Then, it sat on a magic boat like a night watchdog. It looked extremely serious. The dragon elephant soul eater's spiritual sense was extremely sharp. To a certain extent, it was even stronger than Sumo and Wu Er. That was why they let it out. And this fellow was also going all out for the celestial fruit. It was on guard, which was not common for it. Usually, it lay on Sumo's shoulder, half asleep and half awake on guard. This time, its ears were erect, and its eyes were wide open, for fear of missing any information. Sumo laughed and joked. Money makes the world go round, and celestial fruit can make a pig vigilant. When Wu heard that, she smiled and complained. Xiaolang, you are talking nonsense. We are not doing it for the celestial fruit. This is the responsibility of a divine beast. Isn't that right, Humph? Humph. The dragon elephant's soul leader nodded innocently, its voice like thunder, and then it looked at Sumo with disdain. Hee hee. Sumo smiled but did not say anything. Then Sumo's mind moved, and the magic boat directly rushed into the interstellar barrier. At the same time, demon flowers floated on all four sides of the magic boat, and the entire magic boat was protected by a special array formation set up by Sumo. It should be said that Sumo was still relatively cautious. After all, this was a completely unfamiliar place, and he was not sure whether the hidden lotus soul would find him and then harm him. Whoosh, whoosh, just like when they entered the interstellar barrier, the moment Sumo and Wu entered the barrier, it was as if they had entered a deep sea. The pressure in the surroundings instantly increased. This feeling was completely different from in the ancient Lotus Star region. This was also why ordinary cultivators could not pass through the astral world. This kind of barrier pressure could directly crush them. At this moment, the Dustnet world and the ancient Lotus Star region behind them instantly disappeared. Dustnet world, the interstellar barrier, and the colored glass world, in essence, they were different space-time. Therefore, the world Sumo and Wu were in had completely changed. Humph. The dragon elephant's soul leader seemed to frown. It was not that there was anything unusual, but it also felt that the current world was completely different from before. The spirit energy was different, and the aura was also different. The feeling of being lost was still there, but they could see the many floating continents and broken stars in the interstellar desert. Everything here was a bit like the broken star zone between the Pure Land Star region and the Dead Soul Star region. Looking over, there were countless broken stars and floating continents. Xiaolang, there really seemed to be some worlds here, but they were broken, Wu said. Yes. Sumo frowned and nodded. It seems that there was a great battle here. However, Li Shui did not know about the situation here. The star map he gave us had a few small worlds on it. However, there are no complete worlds here. They are already gone. The demonic boat moved forward. Umph! Roar! Suddenly, the dragon elephant soul leader on the demonic boat let out a loud roar and stood up. The voice on the entire demonic boat was like rolling thunder. Looking again, the devil flowers on the four sides of the demonic boat also swayed. The demonic boat's defense was fully activated. Chi chi, chi. At the same time, there was a sound of air being pierced. For rays of sword light attacked from all four sides of the demonic boat. Those were the swords of four peak supremacies. Chapter 919. The murderous aura suddenly arrived. Even with the warning from the dragon elephant soul leader, it was still very sudden. Because Sumo really didn't expect that he would be ambushed in the interstellar barrier so soon. And the opponent's sword energy was so powerful. They were four peak venerables, and they weren't special existences like Red Ghost Warrior. They were real peak venerables. They were four assassins. Their swordsmanship was a level higher than Swordsman 13. In the blink of an eye, everything happened in a flash. Sumo reacted quickly and directly released the lotus vine in his hand. The lotus vine was like a tornado, heading straight for one of the sword lights. At the same time, the yin-yang bell was also released by Sumo in the void. Boom! Buzz! The yin-yang bell rose, and indiscriminate sound waves suddenly spread in all directions. Offense was the best defense. Sumo knew this well. Sumo's other hand swung out the Kuin's soul blade. The tail of the blade was hundreds of meters long, and it directly slashed one of the sword lights. It should be said that Sumo's response was already very fast. The three Lianbo weapons were launched almost at the same time. If it was one-on-one, Sumo's combat power was definitely above the four peak venerables. However, it was a bit difficult for Sumo to fight against four at the same time. Boom! Buzz! Crack! Fortunately, his three Lianbo weapons were launched at the same time, which could be said to be extremely powerful. In all the realms, there was probably no other venerables who could launch three Lianbo weapons at the same time, except for Sumo. The sound waves of the yin-yang bell were like the sea and the tide. With it, as the center, the sound waves rolled back, rolling endlessly. The momentum was almost unstoppable. The 4 streaks of sword light that were flying over all stopped abruptly. At that moment, it was like 4 immortal swords piercing into the sea. Although the sword lights didn't completely disappear, they encountered extremely strong resistance. The 4 dragons wreaked havoc in the sea, and thousands of air waves directly rolled up on the demonic ship. Among the air waves, countless red flowers spread out. In an instant, all the power gathered together. Smoke rose everywhere in the interstellar barrier. Crackle, crack, boom. The lotus vine and the Kuan soul blade each faced one of the sword lights. There was no suspense in these 2 moves. The lotus vine shattered one of the streaks of sword light, while the other was shattered by the Kuan soul saber. There were 2 sword lights that came from the front and the right. At the same time, the 2 cultivators at the peak of the venerable realm retreated as well. Because they couldn't withstand the power of 2 Lianbua, they could only protect themselves. Otherwise, they would become the next Swordsman 13. They would not confront Sumo head-on. Now, they had a deeper understanding of Sumo's power. However, the sword lights of the other 2 cultivators actually broke through the sound waves of the yin-yang bell, because those 2 immortal swords were actually Lianbua as well. The 2 cultivators wielding the Lianbua were naturally more powerful than the other 2 swordsmen. Thus, although they were obstructed, their power was still there. Besides, the 2 top-grade venerable ones with the Lianbua had already mobilized all of their immortal powers. They had unleashed their own strength and the power of Lianbua to the extreme. One of the 2 sword lights went straight for Sumo, while the other went straight for Wu Er. However, Sumo didn't have many chances to make another move. After all, everything happened in an instant. The speed of a venerable one was indescribably fast. However, Wu Er had already made her move. The Kuan butterfly spear in her hand flashed and met one of the sword lights. Wu Er was at a disadvantage in terms of cultivation level, but the Lianbua was of a higher level. Boom! Crack! One of the wings of the Kuan butterfly spear caught the sword light. It was definitely a head-on clash, because the power of the 2 was very close. Boom! Rumble! Spiritual clouds appeared in the sky above the demonic boat. Layers of spiritual clouds rose and rolled upward. However, Wu Er was still inferior in terms of cultivation level. The difference between a 7th layer Venerable One and a peak Venerable One was self-evident. Even Lianbua could not make up for the difference completely. Her opponent was a real cultivator, unlike the red ghost warrior from back then. Therefore, even though Wu Er blocked the sword with the Lianbua, her Dansi shook like a tsunami. Ugh! Wu Er took 3 steps forward and spat out a mouthful of golden blood. Her face instantly turned pale. This time, she was seriously injured. Fortunately, the peak Venerable One didn't attack again. He put away his sword and retreated. Wu Er! Sumo raised his eyebrows. At the same time, he thought of something. The soul hiding cauldron flew out from his cosmos bag. The soul hiding cauldron was used for refining weapons, pills, and artifacts. However, Sumo didn't have much of a choice at this time. In a moment of desperation, he summoned it and used it as a shield. Crack! Boom! It had to be said that Sumo made the right choice. As soon as the soul-hiding cauldron appeared, it expanded in the wind and instantly became dozens of feet tall. Its mouth was facing down, and its 3 legs were above. The peak Venerable One's sword hit the soul-hiding cauldron. Of the 2 Lianbua, the soul-hiding cauldron was of a higher level. Before the smoke from the battle between Wu Er and her opponent dissipated, Sumo and her opponent rose again. Spiritual clouds appeared on the demonic boat again. The entire demonic boat was trembling. Fortunately, none of the Lianbua attacked the demonic boat directly. Otherwise, the boat would have been damaged. Sumo blocked the last attack. The swordsman also retreated after one attack and didn't attack again. In fact, the most important thing was that he had used all his strength in that attack. It would be impossible for him to do it again in a short period of time. Wu Er! Sumo hugged Wu Er. Wu Er's face was extremely pale. She immediately took out a pill from her storage bag and swallowed it. I'm fine, Ware said. Roar. The Dracophant's soul-devouring beast was already in the air. It grew to a height of hundreds of feet, almost covering the entire demonic boat like a mountain. It spread its wings and protected Sumo and Wu-Air. Roar. Its eyes were blood red, its fangs were dozens of feet long, and its dragon tail was like a heavenly hook. It looked like if you want to touch my master, you must first kill me. I will live and die with my master. Sumo was really touched. Oomph. Come back. Sumo shouted. That was because he knew that, given the Dracophant's soul-devouring beast's current cultivation level, it was very likely that it would be killed by a peak stage supremacy. Oomph. Initially, Sumo thought that he would have to call out to that fellow twice before it would come back. However, before Sumo finished speaking, the Dracophant's soul-devouring beast turned into a little white pig. Oomph. With a swish, the little white pig turned into a white light and ran back to Sumo's universe bag. Sumo's gratitude instantly vanished without a trace. It seemed that the fellow was just bluffing. It knew exactly what it was capable of. A battle between peak stage supremacies was not something it could participate in. At that moment, there were already 4 cultivators standing on the 4 sides of the demonic boat. 2 of them were dressed in white, while the other 2 were dressed in black. They looked imposing. The one who was repelled by Sumo was dressed in white, while the one who was holding the Lianbua sword was dressed in black. The 4 cultivators all had cold expressions and held swords in their arms. Swordsmen. Sumo raised his eyebrows because he had seen such swordsmen before. Back then, when he wanted to leave the Prajnar realm, there was a swordsman in white who blocked his way. Swordsman 13 was also a peak stage supremacy, but he was instantly killed by Sumo. There were actually 4 of them this time. It seemed that they had the same power and had been lying in ambush here for a long time. However, whose power was this? Was it the Lotus Soul? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.